the audience this evening and on Rogers Television. And we are also, there may be people watching on the streaming as well on the internet. I can't recall if we're doing it live tonight or not. No. So it's a delayed streaming, but we are working towards the live streaming as well. So this evening we have with us Crystal Dorsch and from the King's School of Vocal, and she'll be singing our national anthem. I would invite everyone to stand if you are able for our national anthem. Thank you, Crystal and Mrs. King. Before we go into the regular council meeting, I think it's worthy of noting that this is, in the last number of days, there has been a significant global event, and that was the passing of Nelson Mandela. And I know that a news release has already been issued on this, but I just want people to be aware that in fact the flags in the city of Kitchener have been lowered to half-mast in respect of his leadership and his death. His leadership was certainly inspirational to the world and so many people, and it did provide hope to not only his nation but to millions of people within that nation and around the world. There is a book of condolences that has been set up in the rotunda. It was set up yesterday noonish, about 1 o'clock actually, and from that moment on there seemed to be a steady stream of people who were interested in leaving a note. I invite anyone who is here this evening and you wish to do so when you leave to sign that book of condolences, and anyone else who wishes to come to City Hall, please do so. It's not restricted to people in the city of Kitchener, of course. And we welcome all people to leave a note on that in that regard. The flags will be, of course, here at City Hall, will remain lowered until Sunday, which is the official funeral day. It's been moved by Councillor Singh that the minutes of the regular meeting held November the 25th, 2013, and special meetings held November 25th and December the 2nd, as mailed to the Mayor and Councillors, to be accepted. Those in favour? Opposed? That's carried. We have several delegations this evening, and there was an omission on the agenda, and we apologize for that. The KW Symphony was going to be here. It was postponed from the previous week, the committee week. So we invite Catherine Kopp to come forward. We'll deal with that item first. I believe this shouldn't take too long, and then we'll get into the issue of Glasgow Street.
Thank you very much, Mayor Zaire and Council. I'm Catherine Kopp. I'm the chair of the board. for the Symphony, and I want to thank you for taking our meeting this evening to review the sustainability funding. We do have some comments about the sustainability funding. The Symphony and the Centre in the Square are currently in discussions about the nature of the ongoing relationship between these two important cultural organizations. Board members from both the Symphony and the Centre in the Square are involved and have stated a commitment to ensure that the health and growth of both organizations can be realized to our mutual benefit, and while recognizing our organization's service to the community. The Symphony understands each organization's respective financial position and is committed to working collaboratively. And as we continue to develop this important relationship, the board feels that it is appropriate at this stage to enter into an objective assessment process with the Centre in the Square to explore ways that we can work together more effectively and ensure the success of both our organizations. So together with the Centre in the Square and with the support of the City of Kitchener, we will engage a neutral third-party advisor to lead an assessment with representatives from all three organizations. To finance this project, the City of Kitchener and the Symphony and the Centre in the Square will each fund 1/3 of the cost, and the Symphony will allocate a portion of the City of Kitchener sustainability funding for this purpose. We're committed to inspiring and entertaining audiences from across the region and continuing as an economically sustainable organization. And we believe this process will support the health and growth of the Symphony as we continue to serve our community. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Are there any questions of the Symphony? And again, this is in relationship to the sustainability funding. We dealt with 2 items last Monday. It's on the committee report, which will be dealt with later on. And there is a motion that was tabled, or it's in front of you, regarding this particular matter. It also deals with the museum. The museum representatives will be here later on, I think about 8 o'clock. So we'll hold that one in abeyance. But are there any questions for the delegation in this regard? Sorry, there are 3. I wasn't looking at my list. Councillor Urbanovich.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. Actually, more a comment, if I may, and then I'm wondering, are we also going to be hearing from Centre in the Square, and if not, can I ask them a question about this when the time comes?
Yes.
Okay. Well, I guess the comment to you is I really want to thank the Symphony for coming forward with this idea. I think the reality is that both yourselves and the Centre in the Square are such integral organizations in terms of the arts and culture community, and the fact that you've come forward in a proactive way to look at how you might be able to do things better and differently to become more sustainable is really tremendous, and I want to congratulate you on that.
Thank you. We're looking forward to the process. I think it'll be very positive.
Councillor Fernandez.
Yes, I want to echo the sentiment from Councillor Urbanovich. It's an important entity, our music culture, and I know that you have strong support from the community, but there's always a good time to have an extra pair of eyes, sometimes look through things and give you an analogy of how things can be done differently. Maybe it isn't always better, maybe you are doing better, but I think it's admirable that you're willing to partnership and work forward to something like that, and I wish all the success for this.
Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you to the 2 of you, and Tim Jackson, who is chair of the Centre in the Square Board, do you want to come down and make a comment as requested? All right. I thought you were referring to the partnership program, but go ahead. Councillor Urbanovich.
Thanks. Yes, Mr. Mayor. I mean, in light of the Centre in the Square being here, I guess it would be good to hear from them as well, to hear, in fact, that they're amenable to this and willing to be part of it.
Yeah, absolutely, Mary Sayer and Council. Centerton Square is thrilled to be part of this process. We have a very good relationship with the Symphony. We have spent most of the last 18 months board to board, staff to staff, working with the Symphony. As you're well aware, there are some struggles in terms of making sure both organizations can remain sustainable in the long term. So like the Symphony, we're very supportive of this review. We've gone through an extensive review process ourselves over the past 12 to 18 months. I've learned a lot, and I think there's probably a lot more that we can learn. I think both organizations recognize that we probably have to do business differently than we have in the past in order to coexist together. And so we're looking forward to the process, same way that Catherine and her board are, so fully on board for this process.
Great. Well, I guess as I said to the Symphony, I want to thank the Centre and the Square for their openness and willingness to be part of this process as well, because I think there is a long history of a collaborative relationship between the two organizations and working together with the city and others, and it's great to see that, continue to see how we can continue to be successful going forward.
Okay, thank you very much, Tim. There is a motion in front of us, and so while the Symphony folks are here, I think we should deal with that portion of the recommendation. It's that a one-time allocation of the listed investment amounts for 2014 from the Arts and Culture Sustainability Fund is outlined in the report be approved subject to finalization through the 2014 budget deliberations. And this is relating only to the Symphony one. We'll deal with the museum later on this evening. And that further the allocation to the Kitchener-Waterloo Symphony be used to fund up to 1/3 of the cost of a joint assessment of the Kitchener-Waterloo Symphony and Centre in the Square, with any remaining funds to be transferred to the Kitchener-Waterloo Symphony once the cost of the assessment is known. Someone prepared to move that? Councillor Ioannidis.
I'll move the motion.
Thank you. It wasn't in our report yet, so that's why I was reading like that. Councillor Gazzola on the motion. You pressed your microphone.
No, I don't want to speak to it. I wanted to make sure that you divided it, and so you have divided the two, so I'm fine. Thank you.
Okay. Any discussion on the matter? Those in... Yes, it was seconded by Councillor Fernandez. Yeah. Those in favour? Opposed? That's carried unanimously. Thank you very much for being here. Okay, the clerk is keeping me honest again. And item number 3 on our agenda was any declarations under the Pecuniary Interest Conflict of Interest Act. Councillor Ioannidis.
Yeah, I want to declare pecuniary interest on item number 3 pertaining to the Planning and Strategic Initiatives meeting, the Zai property downtown.
Okay, so noted. Councillor Singh.
Yes, item number 4 in the Committee of the Whole, if that could be taken out, voted separately as pecuniary interest related to real estate transaction in the near vicinity of that locale.
Okay. Councillor Yanetsky.
Yes, in regard to the Community Infrastructure Services Committee, item number 3, dealing with the Tier 1 grants, conflict of interest, as I'm a member with the Kitchener-Waterloo Community Orchestra.
Okay. So noted. And when we come to those points, if I forget those conflicts, just alert me to it and we'll take it separately. Okay, we now deal with the item that is on the printed agenda, and this has to do with Glasgow Street. There are 5 people here as delegations. I'll call them forward. John Robb.
Good evening, Your Worship, members of Council. I timed this out at 4 minutes and 30 seconds, so I think I should be all right. My name's John Robb, and my wife Sharon and I have lived on the north side of Glasgow Street at number 452 for 32 years. We've been very happy without a sidewalk. As you probably know, in April, Glasgow will be under reconstruction for about 7 months from Westmount Road to Nell Drive for the purpose of replacing the underground services and upgrading the roadway. This is a necessary evil, I suppose, but it's a good thing. It has to be done. We accept that. However, the city has also proposed that on the north side, a bike lane, a curb, a gutter, a boulevard, and a sidewalk are to be constructed. The sidewalk will simply end at Nell Drive, which is a distance of about just under a kilometer from Westmount Road, so that from Nell Drive all the way up to Fisher Hallman, there will be no sidewalk, simply a bike lane and a curb. Now, if you want to walk from Westmount to Fisher Hallman on the proposed sidewalk, you would have to cross Glasgow at Nell and then take the south side sidewalk all the way up. Now, there are only 17 homes on the north side of Glasgow Street between Westmount and Nell. Now, everyone, as far as I know, is in favor of the curb and the bike lane, which makes a lot of sense because it joins up with the bike lane and the curb at Nell and runs up to Fisher Hallman. It would look good. There is no sidewalk from Nell to Fisher Hallman on the north side, and there never will be, all you have to do is drive by there and look. There's sheer rocks, there's no room, you can't do it, in my opinion. But these 17 residents on the north side, there's 13 of us who are strongly opposed to this sidewalk. There are 2 people in favor, and 2 have not responded. Now, not only is this sidewalk that is proposed not wanted, it is not needed. It basically goes nowhere. It stops at Nell, and you're going to have to cross over to the other sidewalk, whether you're coming down from Fisher Hallman on the south side or along the proposed sidewalk from Westmount Road. More importantly, on the north side, there are no schools, there are no parks, no shops, no businesses, simply 17 homes. Now, what's this going to cost, the sidewalk that goes nowhere? Financially, the city estimates about $100,000, but I suggest there's a good chance, and I'm no expert, that this is going to exceed that because, number one, this is a new sidewalk. It's not a replacement sidewalk. You're going to have to dig down, grade it, measure it, and more importantly, the last 200 meters or so runs along Westmount Golf Club. And if you've ever been there, and I suggest if you haven't, take a look, that drops off into a ditch like that. Now, I don't know how much it's going to cost to build a sidewalk there because they're going to have to build it up. I'm not an engineer, but that's almost certainly going to add cost to the plus you're going to have to cut down a ton of trees. Now, in addition to the financial cost of this sidewalk, there's the personal aesthetic costs for people like me and everyone, all my friends and neighbors who are here in the hall today, who are going to lose trees, shrubs, gardens, lawns, hedges to some extent lesser or more to make room for this sidewalk. Now, staff justifies this by pointing to the pedestrian charter, which says and guarantees pedestrians the right to a safe, convenient, and direct walking conditions. Now, is it safe to have to cross a major collector at Nell, a busy major collector? Is it direct? Can you walk all the way from Westmount to Fisher Hallman?
You have 30 seconds left. Or a minute, sorry.
Let me finish, please.
Yeah. Yes, you can. I was wrong. It's a minute and a quarter. Something came up incorrectly here. Go ahead.
The other objection is that there's a Grand River Transit stop at the corner of Aberdeen, which is the only street involved, and Glasgow, which is not accessible to people with mobility issues. The easiest answer to that is to move it about 100, 150 meters up to the corner of Inwood and Glasgow, which is where the bus coming the other direction has a bus stop now. Plus, there's a bus stop up at the top of Glasgow at Fisher Hall, and it is simply a sign in the grass with a bench and no sidewalk. Now, I'm sure with respect to the tendering process, staff says we want to get the tendering out as soon as possible. Okay. Now, what I suggest is when asking for tenders, ask for A, tenders that include the sidewalk and the boulevard, and a tender that says without the sidewalk and the boulevard. I would like to know the difference. Wouldn't you? And shouldn't you, as councillors and guardians of the public purse, so to speak, want to know the difference between sidewalk, no sidewalk?
So if you could wrap up.
What if
please.
it's a lot more than the 100,000 estimate? Wouldn't you want to know that? I noted in the record in June that the city outspent its budget by $924,000 in the first quarter, and rejecting this unwanted and unneeded sidewalk would be a good way to save a lot of taxpayer dollars. I'm going to conclude by simply saying that I was speaking to a neighbor, and he said to me, sidewalks are not cheap, and to build one where no one wants it and where it has little or no value makes little or no sense. Thank you very much for listening. I'm done.
Thank you very much. Are there any questions of clarification of the delegation? Councillor Galloway-Seelock.
My question, Mayor Zaire, isn't for the delegation, but to staff before we listen to the rest of the delegations.
All right, let's go with, I'll come back to you then.
Thanks.
Questions of the delegation only at this point. Councillor Yunetsky.
Yes, thank you for coming in, Mr. Robb. There is a sidewalk on the south side of Glasgow Street. Is that correct?
I'm sorry?
There is a sidewalk on the south side of Glasgow Street.
Yes, there's a Westmount School on that side down the way.
Yeah, it's been there for many years, and it actually runs from Westmount all the way over to Fisher Hallman.
Yes?
Okay. And on the north side, where you live, are there many people walking along the street between Nell and Westmount?
Not on our side, no.
No.
On the sidewalk, I walk my dog on the other sidewalk all the time.
So do basically the people who live on the north side and want to walk along Glasgow just cross across Glasgow and it's safe, basically in front of their house, and then go in whatever direction they want to go?
The only place to cross to is Aberdeen. There are no other streets that run towards Waterloo off of that stretch of Glasgow, except the little crescent, where I'm on the corner of the crescent.
Right.
On Glasgow.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Councillor Gazzola, question of the delegation?
Yes. Yeah. How difficult is it for one to cross the road? Is there a lot of traffic so that you...
Morning rush hour and afternoon rush hour, yes. I mean, the morning, in Glasgow it's been shut, as everyone knows, between Belmont and Westmount for about 8-9 months now. They're a little slightly behind. They're almost done. But in the morning, I would look out and it would be backed up from... There's a school crossing guard in the morning as well, but it's backed up from Westmount, 300 or 400 meters some days. It's very hard for me to get out of my driveway. But most of the time, it's not too bad, although they go awfully fast after dark, as Mr. Cronkite knows. Thank you for coming, by the way.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Councillor Ioannidis.
Thanks, Mr. Robb, for coming in. Please forgive me if I'm not sure if you had mentioned this in your presentation. I was just trying to download the map here to get a better understanding of what you were saying of the sidewalk. And what is the reason why you don't want the sidewalk? Is it just cost of dollars?
Well, that's part of it, but we don't want our front lawn to be reduced by, 6 feet or so, and I'm going to lose my hedge for sure. That's too close to the roadway. I got 2 beautiful 50, 60-year-old pine trees that are about 50, 60 feet high, and I think they're safe, although they may be getting trimmed back. And my wife is very, very upset, so she's not even here tonight. So.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks very much.
Thanks very much, sir.
Councillor Galloway-Seelock, a question of staff before we proceed.
Yeah, I know that we dealt with this matter, I don't know how many months ago at this point. I'm just wondering where we are in the process, and because we don't have any information in front of us today, so where are we in the process? And yeah, maybe that's my first question, where we are in the process.
Okay, who's prepared to speak to that? Not giving the arguments for why we have sidewalks and not just the process, where we stand at this point in time.
Thank you very much. Through you, Mayor Zaire, the process since the last time this was brought to committee, we have continued on with detailed design. The traffic calming component of it has been finalized. So we proceeded with the detailed design for the Nell to Westmount component of it. We've had one PIC, so the public came out to look at the design, and we've proceeded now for tendering.
So is it safe to assume, because the delegations are here, that the sidewalk is in the detailed design?
That's correct.
Okay.
Okay. Any further questions?
No, yes, sorry, I was just formulating it in my head.
Yep.
I needed a second. So have we already made the decision to proceed forward with, or is there a chance for council to make a decision on the detailed design?
Through the mayor, the sidewalk has been designed into this, and it's been tendered that way. However, removing it at this point, if it was a straight removal, would not be wouldn't affect the schedule too much or the price. We would save the money on the sidewalk, obviously. So that is an option. But if there were configuration changes to the roadway, then that would be much more difficult.
My reason for asking is I was just curious if there was another chance for council actually to make a decision on this, because I believe we've already made decisions up to this point. So I was wondering if it needed actually a motion for reconsideration or anything like that. So I just wanted to be clear before we listen to all the delegations. I don't want to circumvent them being able to speak, but I want to make sure that we're in the right procedure and they're here at the right time, because we don't have any information and we're not tendering today. Is that correct?
Fair question. I'm just going to intercede here. It's a fair question. If we had made a decision on it before, my recollection is that we dealt with the road contract, and that the issue of sidewalks was simply going to be following our existing policy. That council itself, and I'm looking to people in the staff here to correct me if I'm wrong, did not make a specific motion related to the sidewalk on the north side. It was discussed, but I don't think there was any decision made other than to follow our normal policy.
Okay, that's fair. I just wanted to understand that.
If you can hold off, because I think we're going to get into discussion. The question came forward whether or not it needed reconsideration. And I'm saying it does not. Okay, so we're going with the next delegation, Mr. Dave Smith.
Good evening, members of council. You're probably going to hear some information that you've just heard, and I apologize for that. We did not coordinate our notes. I live at 514 Glasgow Street. We've lived there for 21 years. Many of my neighbors have lived much longer on Glasgow Street, so we all have a deep interest in the reconstruction that has taken place and will take place in 2014 on our section of this beautiful and unique street in our city. There have been many issues regarding the reconstruction and several public meetings where staff shared their plans with us. These meetings provided staff opportunity to hear feedback from the residents and the residents to hear why and how certain things would happen. The implementations of bicycle lanes, need for on-street parking or no on-street parking were issues that were all resolved through dialogue. Unfortunately, we have come to a point where city staff has informed Councillor Janicki that all of the issues related to the project have been resolved. That is the furthest from the truth as we can get. There are several issues that remain unresolved. The first issue is the desire of the city staff to install a sidewalk on the north side. To begin, I want to make it clear that the impact on the right-of-way to my property is minimal. This would be a sidewalk approximately 8.8 kilometers long, past 17 houses, and cost over $100,000 of taxpayers' money, and would end up in what is presently a ditch adjacent to the Westmount Golf Course. This sidewalk will not connect to another at that point. Even though the road continues to Fisher Holman, the sidewalk would end at that point. People will be forced to cross the street to find a safe way to Fisher Holman. Within the last 8 years, I believe it's 8 years, the city has reconstructed Glasgow from Nell to Fisher Holman and chose not to put a sidewalk on the north side. In fact, one staff member has told one of my neighbors, who isn't here unfortunately tonight, that the city will never put a sidewalk from Nell to Fisher Holman because they've spent tens of thousands of dollars to put up beautiful retaining walls along that section of Glasgow, which was constructed without a sidewalk on the north side. In the words of Steve Allen, a staff manager here, Glasgow is classified as a major collector and is intended to facilitate the movement of large volumes of vehicles, cyclists, and pedestrians. On a busy road such as Glasgow, it becomes more important to provide safe movement for all users. Now, considering this, the city plans to build this sidewalk that goes nowhere and have people cross the street at their own risk. How ludicrous is that? For those of us who live on Glasgow and have to witness the almost daily parade of 18-wheelers making their way to the distribution centre beyond Belmont Ave, we can only imagine the city liability when some person, adult or child, is struck, or how liable will be the city when an errant golf shot strikes a pedestrian. Who is going to pay for snow clearing from the last house to the end of the pavement in the ditch? There are many things that have not been considered by staff. Whenever we have voiced our concerns in opposition to the sidewalk, invariably we've been told, quote, "The sidewalk is a separate issue." End of conversation. Staff has refused to allow us to come to the Community Infrastructure Committee to present our opposition to this sidewalk. I can tell you that in a survey of residents, 100% of the respondents opposed a sidewalk. That represents 76% of the residents on the north side. We do not support the building of a sidewalk on the north side. We have support from residents on the south side on this issue too. The engineering department will claim that the bus stop is not accessible without a sidewalk. Further up Glasgow, near Fisher Holman, the city did not install a sidewalk, as I said, when they did their reconstruction of that section. Presently, there's a bus stop there on the grass and no concrete in sight to make it accessible. Why are we being treated differently than other residents on the same street? The second issue is the poor water pressure in our street. We understand that one of the motivating factors for our street reconstruction comes from the fact the region needs to install new supply pipes from the wells located on and around Westmount Golf Course. The city is using this opportunity to replace the distribution pipes to the Strange Street pumping house, we believe. We need to know how the city plans to resolve our poor water pressure issue at the time of reconstruction. The facts regarding our water pressure are available on the region website. City staff is apparently aware of our problem. We purchase our water from the city, so we expect they will correct the problem. The third issue is the desire of the city to lengthen the left turn lane from Glasgow to Westmount. One of the other delegates will speak to that issue. But at present, there is a good left turn lane there. The city has not seen fit to approach the region to install an advanced green, so I can only figure that the city really does not see this as a problem left turn lane.
You have 30 seconds to wrap up.
Therefore, there is no need to lengthen it. The resulting loss of mature trees will not be necessary. I purposely have not gone into a lot of details on these issues because it just came to our attention of the full community on December 2nd that we could bring our concerns regarding the project before Council tonight. I'm here tonight to ask Council to defer any decisions regarding this reconstruction project on these three issues until a Council meeting in January so we can prepare a presentation to you. This would give us the opportunity to bring it to the Community Infrastructure Committee in January, and at that time it would benefit all of us to know the financial implications of building a sidewalk that is not wanted by the majority, will not likely connect to another sidewalk at the west end. Much more discussion is needed on all of these issues mentioned here tonight. I would ask members of Council to carefully consider our request for a deferral. These are important issues for Glasgow, and I feel that we need to know we've been listened to and heard. In closing, I wish to make it very clear that the vast majority of the residents do not want a sidewalk. It is irresponsible to spend our money to build a sidewalk that goes nowhere and puts pedestrians at risk and that we don't want. I thank you for your time and will attempt to answer any questions as
There are
best I
two
can.
questions. Councillor Ioannidis.
Thank you, Mr. Smith, for coming in and relaying your concerns. My question is, you had mentioned that staff was kind of leaving you in the dark. Were you not invited to the public input session?
We were invited to public input sessions.
Did you?
At the time of the public inset in the meetings, my wife and I were out of the country.
Okay.
I could only speak on what other people have told me, and that is always a dangerous thing to do.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
Councillor Yunetsky?
Yeah, thank you for coming in, Mr. Smith. This issue of the Glasgow Street reconstruction and traffic calming, which is really a combination, has been basically going on for about 2 years. Is that correct?
Correct.
And as you noted, a lot of the issues have been resolved, as well as the previous delegation dealing with the traffic calming, which was dealt with at council back a number of months ago. And the issue of parking and bicycle lanes and widths of roads and the reconstruction, the undergrounds, those are all presented by staff.
Ask your question.
Yeah. So, of all those issues that have been presented, you were at some of those meetings back over the course of 2 years. I think you missed the last one. I think, is that correct?
Yes.
In those terms of attending those meetings and those sessions, staff asked of you, basically, and of other people, do you have any concerns or comments or questions? And basically, you would provide them. Is that correct? To staff?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay.
But the response I got, even when I visited here at City Hall, was and looked at their plan, that's the sidewalk, we're putting it in. It was really in a discussion.
Right. And at the last session, basically, that they had just before Thanksgiving weekend, they did present in their presentation the final outline as staff would see it as to what is to be built, which included the sidewalk. And at that time, as I would see it, would the residents then feel that you were saying that no sidewalk would be wanted, but the staff was still going forward with it? Where did you think it was going to lead to next in terms of your involvement in terms of getting it removed?
Well, because the feedback I was getting from neighbors and others was that it was always a separate issue. And that relates to a question from council a few minutes ago that, thought they had dealt with this. What had been dealt with at Community Infrastructure Committee meeting was the traffic calming, the bike lanes, all those kinds of things where we presented our concerns and issues. There was back and forth questioning and discussions. It was all resolved. The sidewalk, we've always been told the sidewalk is a separate issue. It's a separate issue. Or we're putting it in. That's it. And so when I got to the point in November, where is this going? They're going to be tendering this soon, and are we going to have an opportunity to present our community concerns to council? And that was what led me then to get in touch with Councillor Janicki and say, what's the next step in this? Where's this headed? If we sit back, they're just going to put the sidewalk in, and when they're done, they're going to tell us it was always a separate issue. And we've had no opportunity to really voice our concerns regarding the sidewalk at a committee level. And then I got a message from Mr. Janicki that staff said, all the issues are resolved. We're not taking that to the committee. It's resolved. It isn't resolved, folks. It's a long way from it.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Councillor Gazzola?
Yeah, I know everyone's here for the sidewalk, but you did mention, and I killed two birds with one stone, the poor water pressure. Is that just your problem or the whole street?
No, apparently it's with a number of people on the street. I don't have the details. Dave Kresge, who is a neighbor of ours, who has presented at council, Dave is on top of that. He's out of the country tonight, so I only mention it.
Well, that's fine. I wondered if you or any of your neighbors had approached the city and had been told one thing or another.
Dave has approached the city, and there was a survey from the city. I think I have a copy of it here somewhere.
Well, it's okay. Are you expecting him to come to council at a later time for another issue or not?
I think we can get an answer from staff on that because it was raised with me as well, and we need to get an answer on that from
good.
staff.
And I think that came because Mr. Kresge had been told it's a region problem, but my position is we buy the water from the city. We are your customer.
So it's an integrated system, but it's two tiers. So we'll get it.
Well, we count on our city to look after it because we pay them the bills.
That's correct, and we'll get an answer for you. Okay.
Yeah. Thanks.
Any other questions? Seeing none. Thank you, Mr. Smith.
Thank you.
Dana McRae. We will get not now, as we're hearing the delegations, and then we will have staff fill us in, and we will ask that question. Welcome, Mr. McRae.
Thank you. Fortunately, some of my comments will be repetitive. The comment, one thing I did want to point out, though, is when I heard about this PIC, this was not a presentation that was put to the residents. It was displays put on at Westmount School, and it was kind of a meet and greet. So it was like a cocktail forum where you could kind of go around and talk to people, but there was never ever formal presentation put on, nor the opportunity for people to comment in public and have the staff respond to that. And I think that that's one of the reasons why we get into this misinterpretation that all the matters have been resolved with respect to the residents and the staff. Now, I, for one, am very concerned about the costs that we're talking about spending for sidewalks that are going to have little traffic and still have the ultimate outcome of having people crossing the street, and more so to the danger when we're putting it closer to Nell, where golfers who are going to make a bad strike could possibly, and I have spoken with a resident who lives on that street, on Glasgow Street, who happens to be one of our Ontario justices, and he has mentioned that he has seen golf balls cross over the fence. He's also given me the authority or authorization to say that, in his opinion, it is quite a waste of money, of taxpayers' money, to put a sidewalk on the north side of the street. So this issue about whether or not the public residents that are being affected have been given a proper forum to be able to comment, and for council or for one of the staff members at one of these meet and greets that I've attended said that it is city policy that the sidewalks must go in on both sides of the street, but when we brought it up, he would refuse to talk about it because we were talking about street calming. So we never really got an opportunity. We kept on getting shut down, and then when we find out that this sidewalk is going to go ahead, and the representation is being made to our ward councillor that all the issues have been resolved, when the ward councillor knew full well that those issues were not addressed and satisfied with respect to the water situation and to the sidewalk costs. I called the mayor's office asking for his comment on what is going on here, that we have vocalized ourselves with surveys and with phone calls to the city indicating our dissatisfaction with the process, and yet staff would not put it to the infrastructure committee nor bring it to council. So it seems like the whole process has been underhanded, and it's not been transparent. And I called Mr. Zaire on November the 27th, expressing my concerns, and he said to me that he would get back to me on 3 occasions during that conversation, and I've yet to hear from you, Mr. Zaire. And I would like, after I'm finished, to perhaps get an answer from you as to why you haven't responded to me. Because I am a taxpayer, and I feel somewhat frustrated that I'm paying taxes and getting no service. Now, there's other policies that are being affected with respect to this, the two sidewalks on the street. We got to deal with the water issues, and I don't think the council has been given a proper forum to be able to decide whether or not this issue should be proceeding, because there are a number of policies within the city that are being violated by the installation of the sidewalk. And I concur with Mr. Smith that we should defer this Our neighbor, Mr. Kresge, has spent a considerable amount of time on this, and because of the timing of this meeting, we've had to speak to it, but to put a proper presentation on for council, we do ask for deferral. That's all I have.
Thank you very much, and I will answer your question, and I apologize for not getting back to you. However, I did follow up actually that same day, I believe, with our staff, and was trying to get some additional information. In fact, it was during the interim period of a couple of days, I can't recall, that I received a letter from, I can't recall who, it might have been Mr. Smith, I'm not absolutely certain. Was it? Okay. And forwarded that to our senior staff as well to try to get some additional questions. And I should have followed up to say that it was coming forward, and that was that indication that I found out that there would be delegations here this evening, and felt that that was the best place for it to come forward. But out of courtesy, I should have called you, and I apologize for that. Councillor Inetsky.
Thank you for coming in, Mr. McRae. Where do you live on Glasgow Street?
524 Glasgow Street. I've been a resident there for 20 years.
Okay. And did you attend a variety of those open house meetings that staff presented in the last 2 years?
Yeah. Meet and greets. I call them meet and greets because they're not formal presentations where the staff is giving us the pros and cons. I think that the whole process, the staff is afraid to publicly give us their information. Let's do it one at a time and we can control the situation. It doesn't seem to be able to give us a formal presentation with meeting minutes so that they can get a gist of what the residents' situation or position is. It's just unknown. It's like a cocktail party.
So in all those sessions that were there, this meet and greet PIC, as was referred to, is basically staff are there, you're one-on-one with them and you ask them some questions and then they answer them or they ask you questions. And at that point in time, you relayed any concerns that you had in regard to any issue you had along Glasgow Street, is that correct?
Very much so. I'm very much concerned about the process and how undemocratic it appears that we can't talk in a public forum. I have to come to council to have these issues resolved because I can go to a meet and greet and say everybody's happy when I leave, and how's anybody else going to know any different than that?
Now, were you at the last one that we had just before Thanksgiving weekend?
I'm sorry?
Were you at the last PIC that we had just before the weekend?
Yeah.
And at that time, after you made your discussions with staff and myself as well, where did you think it was going to be the next step, even though you thought there were still issues unresolved? What do you think was going to happen next?
I don't know the answer to that.
Did you think there was going to be a public meeting, a community services meeting to deal with this issue and to talk about the outstanding matters still left?
I was continually told, as was Mr. Smith, that anytime I brought up the issue about the sidewalk at the street calming issues, I was shut down. I was not allowed to talk about it. It was a separate issue. In fact, Mr. Cronkite told me at the meet and greet that sidewalk was going to go in, period. And the only way it was going to stop was with city intervention, with council intervention. That was the only way it was going to happen.
And here we are tonight.
And here we are tonight.
Okay, thank you very much.
Councillor Fernandez?
Just a quick point of clarification from you, Mr. McRae. You are on the opposite side of the golf course. The golf, is that correct?
No, I'm on the north side of Glasgow, on the same side of the golf course.
Same side. Oh, okay. Okay, all right, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Those are the questions. I should have intervened earlier. If it's entirely up to residents or individuals under the Freedom of Information Act, we are not allowed to ask you what your address is. If you voluntarily give it, that's fine, but we are not allowed to ask that. So just keep that in mind, Council. Ken Diebold is the next delegation.
Your Worship, City Councillors, and City staff, my name is Ken Diebel, and my wife and I reside at 421 Glasgow Street. I have attended numerous open information sessions and still have some major concerns with the reconstruction project of our street from Westmount Road to Nell Drive. At the first session we attended, we were told that the street would remain the same width. At subsequent meetings, we have learned that the plan is to widen the street. I was not available with only 2 days' notice to go to the final committee meeting on this issue because I had a prior arrangement. So I was very unhappy that I couldn't make it, but with 2 days' notice, it really wasn't a fair thing. I am told that the 2 trees on my boulevard, which are 40 feet high and were planted by the city over 15 years ago, are to be removed, as well as the boulevard trees going east and west from our home, some lovely oak and other trees. The reason for their removal is that the proposed sidewalk on the north side of the street must be in from the hydro poles that already exist, making the whole street move south towards my property. The point is that it costs too much to move the poles to have the sidewalk where it belongs. The entire renewed street is planned to have lanes of 3.3 meters wide, as compared to the 3-meter width on the now almost completed section from Westmount to Belmont. This is the same argument we had when the region had the Westmount-Glasgow intersection renewed some years ago. The engineers insisted that they wanted to widen the road and eliminate the trees on the boulevard because it would facilitate the flow of traffic. We held fast to have the street kept at its original width, as there were no accidents as a result of the narrower width, and making it wider would only make traffic go faster. This has proved to be the case, and we've had no problems on Westmount because of the narrower width lanes. Your traffic flow studies indicate there are more vehicles per day on this narrower section that's already or almost complete from Belmont to Westmount than on the section from Westmount to Nell. So why do we need to widen the street? When it's adequate for the piece you've already done, why isn't it adequate for us? The left turn lane coming from my house at 421, which is 2 doors, the second house in from the townhouses that face Westmount, we're the first house beyond that. The left-hand turn lane, when the streets are open both ways, never has more than 2 cars in it, even at rush hour. People are going straight through. Coming the other way, at the afternoon rush hour, there are cars lined up way beyond the new, not lengthened, left turn lane going on to Westmount, coming from Belmont. Why does ours need to be longer if that one's shorter and you've already done it? The engineers seem to have their mind made up. It's in the book. It's got to be done that way. I attempted to speak to your arborist, but was given his assistant, and she told me that trees should not be on the boulevard. Interesting to note that new trees have been planted on the boulevard in the now reconstruction section from Belmont to Glasgow. Every effort was made in that section to save as many trees as possible. The engineer did say that the level of the road might change, but that has happened in the new section that's already done, and all the trees were saved with soil adjusted to accommodate the new level. So why do my trees have to leave? I implore you to save the trees, as they reduce the fumes from the buses and normal traffic, and beautify the street and enhance our property, which is why I asked the city to plant them in the first instance. We have an award-winning garden, have had numerous professional and amateur groups tour our gardens, as well as charitable fundraisers, as they are considered prize-winning. Do not destroy our efforts to enhance the street.
Can you wrap up, Ken?
Side of Glasgow, as there are only 2 streets intersecting that side, and this has already been talked about. There are a lot of very attractive plantings which will be destroyed due to the addition of sidewalks on that side, which once again will detract from the pleasant street which we now enjoy. My third concern is the lack of water pressure in the area. We have been limited to watering to 1 day a week, and with the present lack of water pressure, we can only cover half our lawn in the time allotted. We used to be able to do 100%. The shower pressure is such that we need to have a full flow shower head to get a mediocre shower at best. Our son lives 6 blocks from us and has proper pressure. My recommendation is to have no sidewalks on the north side of Glasgow from Westmount to Nell, as they will end there, as the section has no sidewalks from there. My second recommendation would be to limit the driving area width to 3 meters along with bicycle lanes, and definitely saving the trees.
Mr. Deeble, wrap up. I'm giving you an extra minute, please.
I thank you for your kind consideration. If there are any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Thank you, and I believe there may be. Councillor Yunetsky.
Thank you for coming in, Mr. Deeble. You mentioned you live on Glasgow Street. You live on the south side of Glasgow, is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. And how long have you lived there?
18 years. I lived in Old Beechwood for 25 years before that. Interesting to note, most of the streets didn't have sidewalks on both sides, 99% of them.
The trees that's in front of your property, there's 2 mature trees you said were put in by the city?
That's right, at my request.
I'm sorry?
15 years ago, at my request.
15 you mean, or 50?
15.
15,
Yes.
okay. And as a result of what's proposed in the reconstruction, those 2 trees are intended to be removed. Is that correct?
That's correct. Along with all of those going east and west. And there are 3 trees by the townhouses, and there are oak trees going up the street towards Nell. Beautiful trees.
Okay. Did you attend the various PIC meetings that have been held in the last 2 years?
I did, yes.
Were you at the last one?
Yes.
And at that last session, what was your understanding as to what was going to happen next after that last PIC?
I was told that there was no consideration for eliminating the sidewalks, and I was also told that my trees would be gone. I had no choice. And at the same time, I voiced concerns on both issues and got nowhere. I initially phoned the engineering department many times and got stonewalled. I thought I was talking to a federal politician because I never got an answer to anything. Finally today, I talked to someone else, and I got the answers which I've presented here in terms of the width of the road being widened and the other issues. So I have, gained a little bit more today because I wanted to know if they were going to pave Glasgow Lane at the same time, which happens to be my driveway. And there's a house behind me that utilizes it as well. I'm told that they need to do that because they have to run new water lines up there for the house behind me.
Right.
Hopefully with good pressure.
The other topic you brought up, or concern, it pertains to the left turn lane at the intersection of Glasgow and Westmount. As part of this PIC process, did staff address the left turn lane in any way in terms of the length of it that was expressed as a concern, since you only know there's 2 cars there?
The only way I thought that they were extending the left-hand turn lane was looking at the diagram and the drawings that they had. And that was when I got home and I got it off the net. And you could see that they were moving taking my trees away, the trees by the townhouses, and taking half of the boulevard.
So do you think if the left-hand turning lane, which can accommodate, 5, 6 cars?
At the moment, yes.
Is reduced?
It can be the same size it is today. It doesn't need to be reduced.
Okay.
It's absolutely fine. It won't affect anything. They just want to make it longer for no reason.
Okay.
I sit at my computer and I can see the corner. I know in the morning when I'm working in the busy hours as a retired person of 15 years, what's going on in the street. And I can tell you that there is no problem with that left turn lane, and there is not an advanced green, which there would be if it was a problem.
Right.
Either way.
Okay, you answered that question. In regard to the third item you brought up, the water pressure,
Yes.
has that water pressure been there for all the years you've lived there?
No. It was better when we first moved there. For the first 10 years, we could water our lawn in one day. You can tell by how far the hose goes when you're sprinkling, and it's going 2/3 of the distance now, if that.
So who have you talked to in terms of addressing the water issue? Staff at the city or staff at the region?
I haven't talked to anyone about it.
Okay. Okay.
My neighbors I know have talked to the city water people, but I didn't pursue it.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Ken. Jerry Tuttleman.
Your Worship, councillors, ladies and gentlemen, my name is Jerry Tuttleman. I'm a senior citizen, and I've lived on the corner of Westmount Road and Glasgow for over 33 years. I have no desire to be here tonight, believe me, but for reasons best known to the city and the region, you seem to be preoccupied with my corner. It appears that motorists who fly past this corner on their way to and from work have the ear of the city. I won't elaborate, but I'm sure that many of you know of what I speak. Let me discuss the latest issue, the building of an unwanted, unnecessary sidewalk that goes nowhere on the north side of Glasgow. 17 homes are involved, and the vast majority of homeowners and taxpayers are opposed. There has been no debate, yet it appears that staff has evoked closure and don't wish to discuss this any further. How can that be acceptable, Mr. Mayor? There is such strong opposition to this. What studies have been done or surveys taken that suggested there is a need for this sidewalk? It's ridiculous. There's no pedestrian traffic now, other than peak school hours. The present sidewalk on the south side of Glasgow more than accommodates this need. I know. I've lived on this corner for over 33 years. To build an unwanted, unnecessary sidewalk to nowhere that nobody wants begs the question, why and at what cost? Now, before I go any further, I've only had 2 days to really prepare this, but I do want to talk about trees. The project that we have on our side will commence this spring. The spring coming up, that's spring 2014. Why then, with 3 of my trees on the Glasgow side, cut down in spring of 2012, without any comment to me, without any explanation, and to this day, I still haven't had an explanation. I know that they were going to go, but they just showed up one morning, and that was the end of my trees. I have 3 ugly stumps that are sitting there right now. Let me tell you the reason why I'm so strongly opposed to this sidewalk. And this is personal. My home fronts on Westmount Road. I have 110 foot of sidewalk now for which I'm responsible, which includes boulevard maintenance, sidewalk, and snow removal. I'm unable to do this myself, and I'm forced to hire out for this job at a substantial cost to me. The suggested sidewalk on the north side of Glasgow runs another 110 feet along the side of my property. Who's responsible for this maintenance and for snow removal? If you say it's me, then that is unconscionable and unacceptable. To stick a senior citizen on a fixed income with this additional expense is just not right. There is no proven need for this sidewalk. We don't want it. I don't want it. Mr. Mayor, councillors, I ask you please to reconsider, re-examine the facts. What good is this sidewalk that ends at Nell? Who will it service? And why is it really needed? Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Mr. Todelman, you had said...
You have to speak up, Mr. Mayor. I'm deaf as a post.
Well, we'll make sure that we speak up then. Mr. Todelman, I know where you live. Thank you. You were a gracious host a number of years ago, and I've been in your house. I think I may have misunderstood. You talked about the corner that you are at on Glasgow and westbound, but then you said an additional 110 feet of sidewalk. Where was that you may be responsible for? What were you referring to?
I'm sorry, I can't.
So, okay, I'm sorry.
Are you suggesting that the side of my...
You're on the south side.
Yes. No, on the north side.
Okay.
It's going to start from Westmount Road.
I may be confusing you with someone else, and I apologize. I think I'm thinking of Kitty Corner to where you were.
I'm right on the corner
of
Westmount and Glasgow.
Yeah.
There's 110-foot frontage and 110 feet that are going to run up along.
Now I understand. Glasgow. Now I understand. I had you Kitty Corner to where you actually live. Right. I apologize. It wasn't your house. Councillor Yanetsky.
Thank you for coming in, Mr. Tuttleman. Just for clarifications, you live on the same side of Westmount as those townhouses, which is across the street?
No. On
same
the other
side of Westmount.
I'm on the north side. The sidewalk's going up on the north side
That's
of
correct.
Glasgow. I'm on that corner.
Yeah, but those townhouses are on the west side of Westmount where you are as well.
That's correct.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm just trying to clarify everybody's direction here.
I'm right on that corner.
You're on the northwest corner.
That's it.
Okay. That's where you should have started off with. Anyways, were you in attendance at some of these public open PIC meetings that they've had over the last 2 years?
Yes, I have.
Okay. Were you aware that as a result of the review that staff was presenting in terms of the reconstruction and traffic calming was from Belmont Avenue all the way over to Nell, and then they broke it up into two phases, which is Belmont to Westmount,
yes,
and then Westmount to Nell, correct?
Right, I was aware.
And the portion of phase one is the portion that is constructed or is under reconstruction this year, right? It was on the other side of the street from you.
Right.
Yes.
And it's still not finished as of today.
That
was part of phase one.
Correct.
Right? And you're in phase two. But your trees were removed 2 years ago as part of phase one. And in those meetings that the staff had, they had presented, and I don't know whether you saw them or not, and maybe you can answer that. Did you see the tree removal plan that they had to remove trees on Glasgow Street?
I can't read a blueprint all that well. I have other assets, that's not one of them. But when I did ask, and when I was told by staff that there was going to be a sidewalk, I told them right then and there that I was absolutely opposed to it. And they said, well, that's a whole different issue. We're not talking about that right now. We're just showing you the plans. And I think that happened on 2 meetings, and I was unable to attend the one in November. I was flat on my back, having heart surgery.
Right. And you did indicate to us that 2 years ago you had 2 trees or 3 trees that were removed along Glasgow Street.
You say 2 meetings?
No, how many trees were removed on Glasgow? 3?
Big, beautiful trees. Early one morning, the truck came, the guys got out, they cut those trees down, they left all the wood on my sidewalk, and they took off. And I think you were the only one that I mentioned it to, and if I believe right, you just sort of shook your head in disbelief. Not a single word to me about, I knew that they would eventually have to go because of construction. I had no idea it was because of a sidewalk at the time. But I haven't had any explanation whatever.
Okay, that's the answer I was looking for.
Councillor Nansky, do you have any further questions?
Nope, that's it.
Okay, I was just going to suggest the tables are turned, you'd have to speak a little louder. Okay, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Okay, now there have been several things that have been pointed out. I would turn now to our staff, start with Steve Allen, I think, in terms of the project, and if you can speak to some of those issues, and then we'll talk about someone else, perhaps, I don't know, that can speak to the water issue, and also to the issue of that Mr. Diebold raised in terms of 3 meters or 3.3 meters. Those are some of the questions, at least. So let's start with that. Mr. Allen? Or Mr. Wilmer, do you wish to comment first?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. We heard a number of the delegations ask for this matter to be deferred to a committee meeting. I suspect that would be January the 9th. So maybe before we get into a lot of details, we could hear from engineering staff as to what would be the implications of deferring it to January 9th, and 13th. That may change the amount that we're dealing with.
January 13th?
13th, thank you. So we may or may not need to get into the details tonight if in fact you're inclined to defer this to the committee meeting in January.
Okay. A point of order has been called for. Mr. Councillor Etherington.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, why don't we have any background on this? Like, what is it? Where's it coming from?
Well,
I understand the issue and I sympathize with the people involved, but I have no background on this.
Well, that's exactly the point. These, and you'll recall earlier today when we were dealing with effective and efficient meetings, that we were open to members of the public coming with an issue, and Council chose to allow that to happen. So that's what happens, and now that we may wish to defer it before getting into the detail, because it will be the same thing once again. So I would keep your comments at a very high level at this point in time, because actually I'm going to go to Councillor Yanetsky. If that is do you intend to bring forward a motion to refer this to the January 13th?
Yes, I do. And the reason for requesting a deferral is that having gone through this process for the last 2 years and having addressed most of the issues, except the sidewalk issue, and then, of course, the traffic and the water pressure has come up as well. But specifically the sidewalk issue, the staff have come out at those PIC meetings and been in their position indicating they're following policy, and staff is correct, they are following policy, and I can understand where they're coming from, but they're also there at those meetings to hear the residents. And the residents have voiced their issues and have made out their points, and staff have heard them. And when we finished that last PIC meeting in October, I had spoken with Mr. Steve Allen and indicated that now that we're through in the process, when are we coming to this meeting to address these outstanding concerns? And after discussion with him, he indicated that we're not coming to any Community Infrastructure Services Committee because, in staff's opinion, all the matters have been resolved, and they felt that everything is finalized and they can proceed towards tender. That is totally in the opposite scenario that the residents have seen, that they are still concerned about the sidewalk. And so as a result, the residents are waiting for a meeting that staff is not going to call, and because of that, staff is moving forward to call for tenders that will be coming up in the new year, and residents will have no opportunity to speak. So as a result, we have nothing because staff have not prepared anything, and there's nothing tabled, and the residents want to speak. So
okay.
I asked them to come tonight.
And that's fine. So I'm just trying to bring it down just a notch here because I think there probably will be support to referring this to the January 13th meeting. So it's a question of how much you wish to get into the detail this evening. I would suggest that, again, in consideration of what we just talked about earlier today, that this evening would not be the protocol to get into a great deal of detail. because, as has been pointed out by Councillor Etherington already, we don't have anything in front of us. It would be appropriate for staff to go back, prepare a report as to where it is, and that report being made available to the residents who are here this evening, and all the residents actually in that circulation area, and that be dealt with on the 13th of January. So, but before you make the motion, I wanted to give if there are any very high-level points need to be made this evening by staff, and then we'll come back to you.
Okay, thanks.
Mr. Allen.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm going to go through some of the points that I noted during the delegations. So excuse me if I jump around a little bit. Just going to the cost, we are quite confident of the cost of around $100,000. We can have that itemized out so that we can identify exactly what that cost is. Going to the water pressure, the delegations were correct. The water pressure is a regional matter. The region has control over the water pressures. The city has control in as much as we do providing new water pipes on the roadway, so that should help with some of the water pressure, we hope. But we are still discussing with the region through Kitchener Utilities on if anything else can be done. But it looks like there is limited ability to increase water pressures in the area. Mr. Dybel mentioned the road widening. The road is not significantly widening in any area except for near the intersections. The loss of his trees in the boulevard are strictly due to the road being shifted to the south. We have to shift the road to the south because on the north side where we want to put the sidewalk in, based on comments from the residents, we tried to keep that sidewalk as close or far away from the properties as possible, which meant we had to be south of the poles.
Okay, so I'm just going to interject here. So if the sidewalk were not going in, this is why I want to keep it at a high level. If the sidewalks were not going in on the north side, then the roadway may not be shifted south. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. So what direction or what kind of communication has transpired between the city and the region on the water pressure?
The water pressure issue, like I said, it's a regional responsibility. We've asked them what can be done, and they've come back and said they will look at it, but there is very limited things they can do to increase the water pressure.
Okay, so I think that we need to follow through on that a little bit further. And I have three other speakers, and then I will come back to you, Councillor Yunetsky, for the motion. Councillor Galloway-Seelock, keep in mind that we're going to be moving towards that motion.
Yeah, the only reason I'm saying anything is because I think some of my comments or questions from earlier on were misunderstood. This issue just sounded familiar to me, and without having anything in my agenda, I wasn't able to remember where we were at with this issue and what we had dealt with, but I knew we had talked about sidewalks before. So I have no problem with it being here, and I understand that in order to enact change that you needed to come here. So I appreciate that, and I just wanted to make that clear. But the rest of council haven't been as actively involved in this matter as Councillor Yunetsky would have been because of his area. So purely my question was just to, at a high level, understand where we were and why we were here dealing with this today. But I appreciate everyone for coming in. And I think it's important to understand that staff are doing their job because we have an overall policy that they're following. But that doesn't mean that council doesn't have the prerogative to change that if there's reason to do so. So I think it's important for us to get more information on this matter, and I will support a deferral once it's on the floor.
Actually, I'm going to, in light of the meeting that we had earlier today, which you folks weren't here, in terms of our protocol, I think before we debate the issue, there should be a motion on the floor. I'm going to go back to Councillor Yunetsky, and it would be to refer, not to defer, but to refer this matter to the January 13th Which committee? Community and Infrastructure Services, all right. So, Councillor Yanetsky, do you wish to make that motion?
Yes, I do, and that this matter be referred back to the Committee on Infrastructure Services meeting for Monday, January the 13th, and that staff prepare a report. But I also feel that there may be a need for a meeting with the residents and staff, and maybe the region, before the meeting, and maybe the next week or two, so we can maybe sit down and iron out, maybe resolve some of the issues instead of trying to debate this further here at the meeting. And then as a result of that meeting with the residents, maybe we can come to some conclusions and satisfactory resolutions at that time.
Okay,
unfortunately, it just happens to tie over with the Christmas, New Year's season.
Is there a seconder for the motion? There are several. Councillor Glenn Graham. Now I will go to the three remaining speakers, and then we can dispatch with this item. Councillor Gazzola, you're speaking to the motion of the referral.
Yeah, I was hoping you'd let me speak before the motion came, like we did. So I feel rather restricted with the motion. I had a few comments that I want to make, and I would like to go ahead and make them. I really don't understand why we can't deal with this issue tonight. I hate to see it referred and make all these people come back here again. This isn't the first time we've run into this issue. Over the years, I've seen it come to council on several occasions, and in all the cases, council has gone in the direction of the neighborhood. And coming out of that, I expected the last time this happened, I forget what area of the city it was, but I thought that we were going to have a report coming back to council to deal with this issue of sidewalks where the majority or almost all the people in the neighborhood don't want them. I thought that there was going to be something coming forward, and that was actually before this term of council. So I think we need to use a little more common sense when we're dealing with the sidewalk issue. And it's a question, and it's always thrown out there, the pedestrian charter. I think when we have sidewalks on one side of the street, we're satisfying the pedestrian charter issue. The other point I want to make is, while I've got the floor, is these PIC meetings. We've talked to that recently, where there are meetings that a meet and greet is a good description of them, as opposed to a meeting where one person asks a question and everybody in the room can hear it and get one answer, as opposed to meeting individually and getting a half a dozen different individual answers that may be the same. And the third issue I wanted to talk about is, I don't understand, we are the retailers of water. One of the big issues when you're selling water has to be water pressure, and we can't do anything about it. I don't understand that. Whatever needs to be done, I think we need to deal with that issue.
Thank you. Just for council's information, a referral actually does allow debate, discussion. That's why I had asked Councillor Yanetsky to use the referral instead of deferral. Deferral would have been only to time, so discussion is allowed. Councillor Davey.
Thank you. I just wanted to let staff know one of the questions I'll be looking for when it comes back is this idea that the sidewalk's going to end. I presume that staff will have an issue plan for where the sidewalk will continue. So if it's possible, I've heard some delegations indicate that there's some significant variations in slope that might be prohibitive, so I'd like to have that information, even if it's a very, very high level, speculative level. If the sidewalk's never going to be built past Nell, then I think that would be valuable information to have at the meeting that we have. I just want to touch on one point. It's something, a bit of a pet peeve of mine, in terms of the separation between regional government and municipal government with respect to the water pressure. We have regional councillors, so give them a call. Like one of the delegates suggested that we should be dealing with it. Well, for the average homes in that street, I'm sure pay $6,000 in property taxes. If it's $6,000, what? The City of Kitchener gets about $2,000 of that, roughly, as a guess. Contact your regional councillors. They're there to help as well. So I get that you want to have one point of contact, and if you want to have the discussion about regional council, should there be 2 tiers? I'd love to have that conversation, but just as a public announcement, we're happy to pass on the information, but it's a pet peeve of mine that people sometimes think the City of Kitchener collects $5,000 and $6,000 when it's really about a third of that.
Councillor Etherington.
Yeah, through you, Mr. Chair, just a couple of quick points. My first one is that I don't think it's fair of us to sit here and not necessarily dump on, but criticise or be a part of a situation where staff somehow take the blame for something this council promotes, which is this pedestrian charter. I think it's time we re-looked at that whole situation. I've got an identical situation coming up in my ward at Kennedy Palmer, where a group of people have never had a sidewalk. They certainly do not want a sidewalk. They've got the same issues, trees, loss of property, and that's going to come here as well. I'll make sure it comes here. So that's the first issue. It's time we looked at that charter. The second, a pet peeve of mine has always been these meetings that, in my opinion, accomplish nothing. I think you need a real meeting where people can share each other's ideas and talk to staff about where they're coming from. Otherwise, you don't achieve anything. I just went to one in my ward on the Kennedy Palmer one, and believe me, those people left that meeting totally bewildered because they thought they were coming there to get a message to the city. The third point I had, and maybe you can straighten me out on this, I'm getting a little worried about January the 13th. My understanding of that is that it's the public reaction to our budget, and I know in my ward the Victoria Park people upset about the vehicles are also coming to that meeting, and I think earlier today we just deferred another issue to that meeting. So I'm starting to worry about how much we can jam into that meeting. Thank you.
That's a valid point, and in the evening, it's budget input, so it's not a matter of any decision-making at that point in time. It's a little different day, but your point is well taken. And on the issue of format of PICs, I think it's a valid point. I think we need to have that discussion quite separate and apart from this issue, so that's, I would ask you to leave that for a separate item, and staff consider bringing that forward as a point of discussion at the committee. Councillor Glenn Graham.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. And just to be explicit to the request to staff when they bring the report back, there's a number of points I would just like to ensure are covered. And one is risk management, the errant golf shot scenario. If that's been looked at, would a higher fence need to be erected? One is the different standards about whether or not there's grass at one bus stop and the need for a sidewalk at another. The other is the alternative bus stops. One gentleman mentioned that there might be an opportunity to do it somewhere else, a little further down, 150 meters in one direction. I'm sorry, I lost track. The issue of traffic calming with narrower road width. And lastly, the issue of tree preservation. Of course, trees are precious to us, so we do want to know that we're making every effort to preserve them, especially the mature trees. So if that could be dealt with, that would be much appreciated. Thank you.
Mr. Wilmer, you have some input.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The clerk was kind enough to provide for us the reports pending list, and so for the committee day of January 13th, at this point there's between 5 and 6 hours of items scheduled for committee, so it looks like a fairly manageable committee day, even if another item or two is going to be added onto it.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Fernandez.
Thank you. I just wanted to thank the residents of Glasgow Street for coming in and making their passionate pleas. We passed a pedestrian charter when I was on the environmental committee, and it sounded really wonderful. We wanted to get people out walking and less people in their cars. But I've seen more and more the impact of that, because it seems to preclude some common sense around what should be happening on streets. I had a situation just like this in my ward in my first year. It was very distressing to my residents. They lost a lot of trees, a lot of frontage. It has left a lot of bad feelings within that small community, as well as towards the city in general. So I think we need to take a look at this through fresh eyes. I like what I hear with the recommendations from Councillor Glenn Graham, what needs to be answered to help make sure that we know where we stand. And being a consummated tree hugger, the loss of every tree is saddening to me, because they really do a wonderful job of making sure on a busy street like Westmount and Glasgow to take and absorb the toxins that are in that air and give us some nice fresh air to breathe. So I look forward to seeing this come back in a full report, and I hope that we can make a more common sense approach to this decision.
Okay, I'm going to give the last word to the mover, Councillor Yunetsky, and then we're going to vote on the motion.
Thank you very much. In light of the comments from Mr. Jeff Wilmer on the amount of workload that we'll have in January the 13th, I feel that if we refer this back to the January 13th meeting without doing anything in between, we're going to have another presentation by the residents. Staff will have their report ready and provide their comments and position, which is fine. And we'll be now back arguing back and forth. What I would like to have done in that interim, I'm just looking at the calendar here, today's December the 9th, we still have 2 weeks before Christmas. So I would suggest that in that time period, not this week, but the following week, which would be from the 16th to the 20th, I would like to convene a meeting with the residents, appropriate staff, and try to resolve the issues of the sidewalk, the water pressure, and any tree issues as well, and invite the appropriate staff people from the city or the region and have this meeting. In terms of the residents, we'll have to find an appropriate spot to convene it. We can maybe find a spot here at City Hall or whatever. I know it's a short time frame, but I think we can do that. And if we address those issues, then I think at the January 13th meeting, it'll be much shorter and could be just resolved fairly quickly if we can come to some consensus.
With respect, I think that's a good idea to a certain extent. But with respect, the issue of whether sidewalks go in or not is for this council to make, and having a further meeting with the residents and you and staff will not resolve it, because we'll simply hear exactly what we've heard tonight. I think you hear some of the sentiment around the council table. You can have the meeting, but I think sidewalks, there is no point in having further discussion. We get the message, and I think the residents should get the message as well in terms of the sentiment that is going around the horseshoe. It'll go nowhere in terms of the sidewalks. You'll just frustrate everyone in that and saying exactly the same as you've heard tonight.
I can appreciate where you're coming from, and your point has some valid arguments. I should also add that Mr. Kresge, who has basically been the person spearheading this issue, is unfortunately away and was unable to come today because being absent. And he's the one who's done the majority of the work, or a good chunk of it, and has presented or prepared a presentation that he would like to share with council from a PowerPoint point of view and elaborate on that. So I would then, based on that, move forward to the January 13th meeting and ask for council support for a referral to that date.
And there need to be some additional bits of information put together, which have been elicited or stated already. And I was only referencing that there's no point in talking further on the sidewalk issue, because that issue sits at this council table and this council table alone.
Well, I can meet with the residents and try to address the issue of water pressure and landscaping, maybe individually and maybe with staff, just to try to move this along.
That's
but
correct.
I understand where you come from, the sidewalk. I agree with you there.
Okay. So I'm going to call the motion. This is on referral to to January 13th. Those in favor? Really? Those in favor? Opposed? That's unanimous. Okay. I hope that's clear to everyone. Thank you. Thank you for being here. Okay, we said we would defer the one item until following that discussion, and that is going back to the Sustainability Fund. And we have David Marskell and Linda Faby here from the museum. And I would ask you to come forward. And give us an update and speak to the request for the $120,000 from the Sustainability Fund. And you have 5 minutes.
Thank you very much, Your Worship and councillors. Of the Linda Faby, David Marskell on the Linda Faby half of the team. And I'm here representing the museum. I'm not the chair of the board, but he was unable to be here this evening. But I do have the privilege of serving on this board along with some others, and it is a tremendous privilege. Because the museum is in its 10th anniversary now, actually celebrated that in September. And throughout this time, we've always attempted to awe, to inspire, and to enlighten. And I'd like to give you a little bit of a background of how the museum has attempted to do that in the last 10 years. I would imagine most of you will remember we started out as the Regional Children's Museum and reframed itself about 3 or 4 years ago, and it, as a result, has become, in my very humble opinion, virtually a very unique, if not world-class museum in Canada and beyond. We've collaborated internationally with areas such as China, Ireland, Jamaica, Taiwan, and of course the United States, and soon to be announced with Russia. Watch for that coming. Of course, I mentioned we have been completely reframed, retitled to put not only the museum but this region on a far bigger cultural map, and we believe that's happening. We have attracted world-class exhibitions that included Jane Goodall was one of the first big ones you might remember, Andy Warhol, Our Body, The Universe Within, Tom Thompson, of course, one of the famous Group of Seven, the Titanic, Yoko Ono, you'll remember actually yesterday was the death of her husband's anniversary of his death, James Cameron's Avatar, rock carvings from China, and the list goes on and on. My personal favorite was RAM, Rethinking Art and Machinery. The museum has developed and marketed more than 25 Ontario Ministry of Education curriculums based on the curriculum and on programs that we have been able to distribute throughout the province. And I happen to know, being a former educator with the Waterloo Region District School Board, the museum has worked very closely with educators locally as well as externally. Here's what the really good news is. In 10 years, the museum has increased its revenues by 81%. Its turnstile by 91%, and memberships by 74%. School attendance has risen by 64%, and last year, in the year of employee unrest within the school system, the museum actually increased the number of students and classes visiting, and that was unheard of. Totally very exciting. Camp attendees have increased by 24%, members and families by 74%, child admissions is up, corporate sponsorship up, and rental income a whopping 1,072%. So obviously that's good news. The museum's earned revenue approaches an amazing 50% of our total budget, and the national average is about half of that. So we think that's pretty impressive as well. Now, having said all that, the reason the museum is still existing is that we've had to make a lot of reductions. In the last 2 years, almost $500,000 and a total of 7 staff over a year and a half time frame. Last year's reduction has hurt deeply, and we cannot afford to cut any more staff. We're still doing great things, but the museum is fragile and is still not completely sustainable. There.
Thank you very much, Linda. We are fragile and not sustainable, and I just wanted to very quickly address a couple of things. Reports in the record last week, the numbers were not quite accurate. We received $0 from this council for operating, zero, and we receive $120,000 through the Sustainable Fund, which we're hearing should be cut back. And then there's about $112,000 budgeted for maintenance on the city building. We've used about $68,000, I believe, for this year. And then there's the $1 in rent for use of the building. Total municipal funding is about 22%, while national museums receive 65-75%. That's why our earned revenue must be high. We believe the museum fits very well into downtown Kitchener and the plans, and that we're your partner and a cultural anchor for downtown. We meet the need of the community, and once the LRT is downtown, we'll have a whole new part of this community at our doorstep, and it's very important that we're sustainable and ready for that. However, without proper funding from the municipalities, the best we can do is limp along and cut back the programming that we've been used to and what we feel that this deserves.
Could you wrap up, David?
We would like to work with this council. We'd like to work with the city. We'd like to know what you would like us to be as our board considers options and what you will fund going forward. Thank you very much.
There are a few questions. I'm not sure who they'll be addressed to, but Councillor Gazzola is first.
Yeah, last week when this came to committee, I had asked about 2013 statements. The latest statements we have are for the year ended June 30th, 2012, and I was curious as to what has transpired since then. For example, and I'll ask you, there was a loss in 2012, an operating loss of some $537,000. Where were you at? What were you at for 2013?
We balanced the budget.
So you broke even in 2013?
Yes. The numbers have just gone to our annual AGM for BDO. The auditors have just completed the review, and we broke even. But we've cut $500,000 in 7 staff and a lot of programming to do that.
Are the financial statements available?
Yes, we can send them through tomorrow morning.
Okay.
Okay. You mentioned that you don't get any city funding, but you do get the city looking after your main facility, right?
There's a budget of $112,000. I believe, I'm telling you the truth, that it's $68,000 we've spent of that. We come to the city asking if they will fix door handles and paint, and it's a maintenance budget for the city building.
Okay, the figure was $69,000 for 2012, and but you pay no taxes, you pay no rent.
Correct. Just
other than $1.
Same with the History Museum and Dune and K-WAG and Center in the Square and Clay and Glass. We're the same as them, I believe.
On one of the financial statements, there's a caption dealing with deferred capital contribution. What is that?
I can only, without our CFO here, I believe it's some of the exhibits that we purchased for, like, the bed of nails or some such thing that we would defer over.
Fair enough. I'll leave that with you, okay? Because the only other question, the question I did want to ask, so somewhere there I read that you're borrowing money at 7%, which to me seems rather high in this day and age.
I agree with you, and that's what we had to do to stay open. The way the cash flow works, and we come to councils and ask for funding. So January we're flush and we can pay our bills. At this time of year, it's extreme, and not everybody is being paid their full salary. And to get through at one point in that year, to get us out of that hole that we had dug, we had to borrow money at 7%. We've since paid that back.
My final question is, what happens if this council doesn't approve the additional $120,000? And from what I understand, this was a year-to-year thing that I think the message we were getting at our committee meeting last week, that this is definitely the last year for that type of funding. What happens if you don't get that?
it's not an additional amount. It's the same amount we've been receiving for the last couple of years. And quite frankly, it would be a dire situation for the museum. The board, it's a stellar group of people. They're looking at different models. They're looking at scaling back. They're looking at how we might be able to bring in exhibits or just use it more for rentals and have fewer exhibits. The board has been meeting quite frequently and looking at a number of options, some of them not very pleasant.
Thank you.
Thanks, John.
I have two members of staff wishing to add some information, Mr. Regier and Mr. Wilmer. Mr. Wilmer? Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The comment was made that I think needs to be clarified, that in the recommendation that staff brought forward where it refers to one-time funding, we're not saying that this would be the last year of that funding, but that we're saying there's no guarantee beyond 2014, as the sustainability funding in general is going to be reviewed more holistically in 2014, but not to say that there couldn't still be sustainability funding granted to the museum beyond 2014.
Okay. Mr. Regier, do you want to add something else?
Yes, just briefly that we did receive the financial statements. I think I got a copy on Friday from your staff, David, and then again this morning. And just between the nuts and the bolts, we didn't forward it on to council. I thought somebody else had done it. Somebody else must have thought I did it. So then, but Laura is copying them right now for council, so they'll be here.
Other questions? Councillor Ioannidis.
Thank you, Linda and David, for coming in, and I do appreciate everything that you do at the museum and creating the vibrancy in our downtown core and all that. It's and the testament to you guys and how you run your operation. I guess my one question is, the Regional Children's Museum, is that a current name?
No, that was what people before us opened 10 years ago.
Okay.
We're just trying to pick up the pieces and keep it going. And it was believed a few years ago that if we broaden the appeal ethnically, geographically, and by age, that we would have a better shot at
Okay, that's good to know, because this kind of just happened at my household with my kids. And my wife came to me, where's this Regional Children's Museum? And I'm like, you're talking about the museum? And so their school notes are getting these invitations to go to the Regional Children's Museum. So since you're being an educator here, hopefully that somehow we can get that corrected and have the proper branding that you guys properly deserve.
Linda, maybe you have a pipeline back.
May I comment?
Yes, please.
Thank you. There is some confusion occasionally between the Regional Museum on Homer Watson, which I think is funded primarily by the region. But I just want to assure you that the museum, formerly the Children's Museum, still has amazing exhibits for children.
Oh, no,
That's
no
why
doubt.
student enrollment is up. Go in any day, and you'll see everyone from toddlers to high school students there, learning and playing together.
And no doubt, I know my daughter was there last year with their school. Now it's my son, and they're 1 year apart. And I know it was a highlight. And then they asked my father to go there. Anyways, thank you for everything you do.
Excellent.
Councillor Singh.
Yes, and thank you for the delegation to come before us and highlight some of the achievements that the museum has been able to do over the past few years. And I had some similar questions at Councillor Gazzola, so please don't take it as me challenging your statement. You said when you started off, Dave, that you wanted to set the record clear that the City of Kitchener doesn't give any operational funding to the museum. But then again, you are leasing the premises from the city for $1, and then they are, I guess, remediation dollars for capital improvements to the facility as well. That's budgeted. Had that not been there, had that had to come entirely from the museum's budget, would that not be an operational expense that you would have to incur then?
To have a building?
To lease for a building, to lease a building, or for improvements or repairs, had you had to do to the building as well?
No museum stands on its own. No museum is sustainable on its own. So for us to go out and have our own building, we'd have to go and raise several $1 million or $30 million in the case, I think, Homer Watson, they raised to the federal government and so on. So without the space that we have, we'd have to raise that money.
Now, mind you, I'm not questioning as to why we do it. I just wanted to ensure that and set the record clear on our part that the City of Kitchener does support operationally the museum by giving a facility on lease for $1, by still having a repairs budget for the facility as well, because it's still our building, which in effect is operational benefit to the museum. So the point I'm getting at is the City of Kitchener, the taxpayers of Kitchener, do fund and support the museum far above and beyond of just the monies that are coming from the sustainable funding. And it's important to acknowledge that. It's not a bad thing, it's a good thing. You pointed out all the benefits that the museum has to this community. As an anchor, it is to the downtown, to the vibrancy of it, the mediation of it. So, and acknowledge and support all those points. But it's important to reiterate that the City of Kitchener is funding far more than just the sustainable funding. So one last question is, and Mr. Wilmer kind of touched on it, that this is 1 year that we, council would be supporting the sustainable funding, and then we will have to revisit again in 2014 end. And initially, when this sustainable funding model was looked at, and the museum was looked at as one of the benefactors from it, it was considered not to be an ongoing sustainable support, that there would be one day where we would have to curtail entirely or limit as to what is given from that sustainable model. Do you think that the museum will be working towards that, ensuring and knowing that that funding may come to an end at a point, and you'll have to, your operational model will have to change, or your budgeting will have to change to coincide with that one day of funding coming to an end?
Yeah, I did not know it was. I thought the sustainable money coming from the Prosperity Council's efforts was ramping up. I did not know it would end in a year or 2 or 3 years. I missed that. I was on the Prosperity Council. I missed that.
And again, I want to make it clear, as Mr. Wilmer did, I'm not saying it, and I don't think this council is saying it right now, that it's going to come to an end next year. But it's not indefinite funding, that this would have to be reviewed ongoing. So just wanted to see if you guys were building into that. But it's, you made it clear that you weren't aware of that yourself. So.
Well, I mean, the challenge is that we've cut $500,000, we've cut 7 staff, and we may have to cut another $120,000. So there's not going to be much left. And we certainly won't be having exhibits from China and Russia and world premieres from Avatar and so on. So the board is looking at other models, and as I said earlier, some of them are not very pleasant models. And so we'll have to keep going the best we can, stay on our feet, keep swinging, and do what we can for downtown Kitchener, and be ready for when the light rapid transit comes. Hopefully there'll be a reason to get off the train.
And hopefully that will help.
Yeah.
The fact that there will be easy access to the museum regionally. Mm-hmm. So okay, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Councillor Vrbanovich is next, but I think you're going to have to be prepared for some additional questions from the financial statement. It doesn't look like it's a break-even, so we have to understand that financial statement. Councillor Vrbanovich.
Well, actually, Mr. Mayor, I was going to make a comment and ask whether or not you're looking for a motion, or you're going to the committee chair, Councillor Ioannidis, to bring it forward, and then I'll make comments.
There will be a motion, and it would come from the chair of Community Services, which is the same type of thing that we had done with the other two, as you know, last week, which is in our from the committee report, which will deal with the balance of that fund.
So I will hold off then on my comments.
On a motion, yes, that's correct. This is questions at this point in time. Councillor Glenn Graham.
Thank you very much, and thank you so much for coming in and all you're doing for our community. My one question is, do you have charitable status in terms of donations, or could you flow through the city? Has that been considered? What's your current status?
We are a private not-for-profit. We have charitable status.
Okay,
and
great.
issue taxes.
And how is your fundraising going?
It's going okay. I mean, we had a very good year last year because of provincial funding around marketing dollars for the China exhibit, the Avatar exhibit. Since 2008, the funding is, it's been a challenge for sure, and it seems to be getting worse with wealthy individuals and foundations that we could count on in the past. So we've been turning to earned revenue, which, as I say, museums can't exist like that. We'd have to charge $147 to get in.
I think you've been doing a fantastic job, very fiscally responsible, and bringing in great exhibits. So keep up the good work. Thank you.
Councillor Gazzola, I knew you'd click back in there.
No, and I'm not going to ask any more further. I just wanted, when the appropriate time comes, I would like to make a comment. Okay, I would just one comment that you didn't break even last year. You were I see a loss here of 140,000 and a big transfer from an endowment fund, but and that's not fair to throw those things at you. You know, I would like to make a comment when we deal with the resolution.
Thank you. Is there any clarity that you can give to us in terms of the comment about breaking even relative to what we've just seen in the financial statements?
No, I will get myself in deeper trouble if I try to clarify that.
Okay. I think that's going
to... some of the accounting procedures that BDO, the end result was it went from a $6,000 or $7,000 profit to what you're seeing there.
Okay, I think we need to have a reconciliation of that to understand that. The recommendation as it will come forward, the motion, will be, whether it's for or against, will be subject to final budget deliberations in January. So there's time for you to get that information to us, but I think that's absolutely critical for you to do so. Okay, these are questions yet? I've got two people. No. Councillor Galloway-Sealock.
Yeah, and I'm sorry if I missed this. I was paying attention, but I might have missed it. You said, David, in your presentation that $0 from the city go toward operating, and you get $120,000 for the sustainability. What does that go towards?
Well, it goes to our general budget.
So that would be operating, but we don't give you any specific money. Is that what you meant? Like you don't?
Yeah, I was referring to the report in the record last week that itemized what some other cultural organizations, very good ones, get. They get $200,000-300,000 in operating, plus they get something from sustainable funding. We get zero there, and we get the lion's share of the sustainable funding.
Okay. I think that's an important clarification to make. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. No more questions. Thank you. Councillor Ioannidis.
Yeah, I'll move the recommendation.
And the recommendation is subject to budget deliberations that the $120,000 from the sustainability fund be forwarded on. Comments now on, there's a seconder for that. Councillor Benovich. And Councillor Benovich, you're on for comment.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. I will be supporting the motion that's before us. I think the museum has done an exemplary job over the past number of years of both increasing its presence in our community, increasing the numbers of people that are coming down to downtown Kitchener for its exhibits, and increasing the mix of people that are coming down, because it's not just geared to a particular age group or a particular segment of our community. They're really trying to ensure that they offer a wide variety of opportunities throughout the year that will appeal to different demographics, and I think it's been a real asset to the city of Kitchener. I think when I look at the kinds of government dollars that go into some of the other museums in the community, I think we're getting excellent value for our investment dollar through this sustainability funding, and I honestly hope that they, as they continue to work through their sustainability issues, they can find a model that will ensure their ongoing success, because it really is a true gem in our community.
Councillor Gazzola.
Yes, I want to make it very clear that I really do appreciate the museum. I still call it the Children's Museum, but that's because I'm just slow to learn. And I do appreciate what has been done, and I can remember before it was even started in the development, and you have done a tremendous amount of work, and I appreciate it, and it's something that a lot of people have enjoyed and will continue to enjoy. The problem, though, I will not be supporting the recommendation that's before us. About 5 years ago, we went along with this principle of putting more funds for arts and culture, and we had an additional percentage point, per capita percentage point, that we were going to put into this to help sustainability. We ended up putting in some $200,000, I think, this year because of a slight population growth and whatnot. We're putting in $236,000, and my problem is that $120,000 of that, over half of it, is all going to the museum. And it was my hope. I didn't have a problem with putting more funds into arts and culture. I'd gladly see some of the funds that we're directing to our developers in the downtown be going more to arts and culture, but we seem to be supporting our developers considerably. But in my opinion, the 120, too much of that funding is going to one or two organizations, especially to the museum, and I had hoped that additional funding would help all organizations, small and large, and that really is not the case, or it has not been the case. It's 5 years, and every year we say, well, it's not guaranteed. It's only for this year. So, but hopefully we need to look at the whole issue. I would like to support that full amount going to the museum, but at this point I can't. Thank you.
Councillor Davey.
So just a clarification, we are only dealing with the museum portion of the recommendation, is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay, thank you, no question, no comment.
The other two items, there are 4 items that are part of the report that the committee can vote later on. Councillor Singh.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. And you know what, from the earlier comments that's already been said by Councillor Ravanovich, that I am quite supportive of what the museum does and the benefits it brings to our community. And I initially moved the sustainable funding model. This is back in 2011 when it looked very difficult and challenging, the budget that we were seeing to approve that funding model. And it came from the Economic Development Fund, the EDIF fund. And I'm still supportive of it. And I think we need to continue to nurture and support our arts community. And I will support for next year the funding still going forward towards the museum. But I want to reiterate the points I made through my questioning as well, that the larger overall model for sustainable funding, we need to consider other organizations as well. I'm glad that the City of Kitchener was able to sustain and nurture the museum over the last 4 years through this the per capita funding. But you know, that will have to come to an end at a point, because there are so many other organizations that, just like the museum, also need a helping hand as well. So I would hope that the museum takes those comments into effect, and you know, as Councillor Glenn Graham mentioned, that there's a lot of ability to give in this community as well, and we need the museum hopefully will you know, optimize that potential in the community to raise funds as well, apart from just what the city is able to do.
Okay, there are no other speakers. I'll just add a comment to some of the other comments that have been made already. I believe that the museum has done a great job in terms of the mission that they have, and in terms of creating some animation in the core of the city. It is one of those institutions that that services the region as a whole. It is receiving funds from other municipalities, not to the extent that they should. And to not support them, I mean, notwithstanding the comments that Councillor Singh has made or anyone else, to not support them this year would be absolutely disastrous, and in fact would probably mean shut their doors, or it would be a shadow of what they have, and that would be cutting them off at the knees and, without notice. And so I encourage you to support this for 2014. Recorded vote has been asked for. This is dealing strictly with the funding for the museum. You may now vote. Sorry, I haven't. That carries. Thank you very much. And this will go forward now to our budget sessions. We have one on this Thursday, as well as January 30th is our final budget day. Thank you. Okay, we have two other delegations yet regarding Finance and Corporate Services. Item number 3, Natural Gas Program, Harold Druids. Welcome,
Thank
Harold.
you, Mr. Mayor. Again, I have handouts.
You could easily give that to us ahead of time so you don't have to use up your time.
Mr. Mayor, first time I was told that.
No, I mean on a regular basis. It could be handed out to us.
By the way, it's been an interesting day at City Hall, and I've been up since 5 o'clock this morning. I put the finishing touches on my presentations today, so I'm a very active senior.
Go ahead. Your time is running.
Thank you. I have read and reread the Director of Utilities report dated November 26, 2013. Quite frankly, I find a lot of the content and what KU supposedly does with its customers difficult to believe. I believe the independent consumer research and survey company needs to direct this project in its entirety. In our opinion, companies used in the past will completely carry this assignment out in a non-arm's length transaction. Just like some of you were surprised at some of the results of the Spring-Summer 2012 survey, I suggest the same could take place on this survey. I suggest the key purpose and question for the customer is stability at what cost? I believe the following points, in addition to the one made in the previous paragraph, needs to be considered during the scope of this survey. Page 4-2, the middle of the page. In my opinion, our opinion, it should read, consultants will work with staff, councillors, and members of the public to develop a questionnaire to test with customers in the focus groups to ensure all questions are understood and interpreted properly by customers. Matter of fact, I would like to think, at the very least, since Bob Donald brought this issue to my attention, that he and or I be part of the focus group. Both of us have had several meetings with staff and gained a lot of information on this issue. Doing so would also ensure proper balance in this complete process. I do not believe a random selection of calls by the customer and research company is the correct method. Just think about this. Would you be able to intelligently, no disrespect, respond to a cold telephone call regarding this survey? People need time to reflect the information before they can intelligently answer the question. We suggest the survey needs to be on paper and mailed out to random customers, giving them a date by which the questionnaire needs to be back, returned by mail, or delivered to City Hall, or even to the various community centres. If the sample size of 600 is not realized, then another random mailing to different customers needs to be sent out. By the way, receiving more than 600 responses is better than receiving less than 600 responses. Page 4-3, top of the page. Our opinion, it should read, the consumer Research and Survey Company needs to work with corporate communication and community services to determine the strategic events and outreach opportunities for this project. This same needs to happen with engaging citizens in strategic community outreach opportunities to speak with the customers about what KU does, offers, and promote how customers can take part in the survey. Again, the consulting company needs to chair the public meetings. Page 4-3, middle of the page. Our opinion, it should read, the consulting company will analyze and share the research result with the corporate leadership team and Kitchener Council. We've heard a lot today about public input, both at this session and the afternoon session, and I see what Compass Kitchener has, and I see here, page 5A-6, leadership and community engagement, promote informed decisions that last. Well, guess what? One of the important things, and which was said by the people from Glasgow Street, okay, it must include a framework that includes clear information, and I'm going to emphasize dialogue. And I've talked about this more than once, including at the region, as you know, Mr. Mayor, and I'm still waiting for it. Anyway, I will be glad to answer your questions, and thank you for your time.
Good timing. Still have 34 seconds left.
I rehearse with my wife.
Good. Okay. Are there any questions for Mr. Druids? Seeing none, thank you. No questions. There may be dialogue, but there are no questions for you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Councillor Davey, do you wish to bring forward item number 3? This is the December 2nd FNCS committee report.
Yes, it's just bringing forward the referral motion from December 9th, and that's that staff be directed to proceed with requests for proposal to hire the services of a research consulting firm to develop and conduct quantitative and qualitative research related to our natural gas supply program with Kitchener residents in 2014.
And it's moved by you and seconded by Councillor Singh. Councillor Fernandez.
Thank you. I didn't have any questions of the delegation, but I do have a couple of questions for staff. They make some interesting suggestions regarding a focus group and regarding the consulting company analyzing the research results. So have we, will we be deciding before or after we hire the consultant who would be in a focus group? And how would we gather that group together?
Ms. Houston?
I would suggest that we can do that after we hire the consultant to determine what the focus groups would be.
Okay, so then would that be as I don't want to say terms of reference. I'm trying to think of the appropriate word. Direction that we would be giving to the consulting firm. Who would we want in that focus group? How do we decide? Would they be deciding who's in the focus group? Would we be giving them some suggestions? And we want to make sure that this is a homogeneous group of people that are in the focus group.
We would be looking to them for guidance in terms of their expertise as to how to create those focus groups.
Okay. And then the second suggestion that I thought was interesting, and I didn't pick this up in the report, but the fact that it said here that Kitchener Utilities will analyze and share the research results. Why wouldn't the consulting group be analyzing the research? Or would they, and then what would happen from there?
Ms. Houston?
They would certainly be part of that process, and obviously the staff would have to prepare a report to come back to committee. So I think it's a joint effort, but it doesn't change their objectivity in the process.
Okay. Yeah, I think it's really important that the analyzing be done by the independent body. The information, of course, needs to be shared with our Kitchener Utilities staff so that the report can be presented. But the survey firm would have the expertise that would be needed to analyze the data that they would be receiving.
Agreed.
Okay. the idea of a paper, we're trying to go to a less paper survey. Is there a way that we can alert our Kitchener Utilities customers that there is an opportunity for a survey, and that they can do it either by printing it out themselves, or they can go online, or they could even opt for a phone survey? Is there a way that we can do that, or so that we get a wide variety of responses?
Ms. Houston.
I think you want to do a number of things, because you want to have a randomly selected sample, as well as you can keep in a separate group the people that just voluntarily choose to respond to the survey. I think you need to keep those in separate groups for analysis purposes, but we can certainly look at both. The difficulty with just doing a mail-out survey is that you have to send out a fairly huge amount in order to get a small response back. So you might have to send out 12,000 to get like 600 back. So that's the challenge with just sending a broad mail out.
And I agree with you, Ms. Houston, but I was just thinking that since we send out the bills, if there would be an insert or something attached to the bill that to let our customers know this survey is coming forward, just to give them a heads up so that they're ready, that should the consulting group decide to do whatever way they're going to do it, at least people will have some kind of a heads up, and maybe take a minute extra to look at their bills, or be a bit more aware.
And we can certainly do that, yes.
Okay, great. I think that was all the questions I had.
Councillor Gazzola?
Yeah, does the consulting group report to the city as opposed to Kitchener Utilities? Will they be coming back for a formal presentation to us?
Are you referring to the council? Because
to council, yes. Yeah.
Kitchener Utilities is the city.
Well,
so.
Yeah, no, but will they be coming back to this council chambers and reporting on their survey?
We can certainly make that part of the terms of reference, that would include a presentation to council, if that's what you would wish.
Yeah, that they answer to this council. Yeah. The number of 600, is that a random sample? Is that the number that is required?
That's a typical number that consultants recommend, yes.
Okay, so that's legitimate. No, that's fine. When, after this is done, will the public who haven't been involved in that group of 600, will they have an opportunity to comment or to add their voices to the issue?
If we put the survey on the website and we advertise in a bill insert, any customer can respond to that, but we would have to keep those results separate from the random survey that the consultant is conducting.
And that's good. Is that what you're intending to do?
Yes.
Yeah, okay, so you will have the two, but the one is separate. It'll be interesting to see how they match up. Okay, the other, that's good. The other thing there were a number of other questions asked about this whole policy issue, and staff we're going to look at these. Will you be bringing something back to council on some of those other questions?
I'm not sure I understand the question.
Well, one of the questions I asked was there a different? Can we have can we offer both products the way mortgage companies offer variable rates and fixed rates? Can we look at both of the?
I think that the question in terms of operating with two units was answered at the committee. Categorically, the answer was no, because we are under the OEB rules that we cannot offer alternatives. We are the default supplier. This relates to supply only.
That's the reason I'm asking. At one point, the department head said, yes, we can look at that, and then later on, someone that's lower down in the department said, no, we can't do that. I'd really like a definitive answer on that. Do we answer to the OEB? I don't think we do.
Oh, yeah. Well, yes, we do.
I think we do have to follow the OEB guidelines in terms of how it's set up in order to be consistent with what's intended for utilities across the province. And Mr. Gruenbauer does have a lot more experience with the OEB than I do, so I would certainly defer to him and to his expertise in that regard. So yes, we can only have one policy.
Okay. That's all. I'm not sure that but I guess it takes a little research to find out. Thank you.
Councillor Davey.
Thank you. I'm not sure the question was asked, but what happens if this fails? This motion fails?
If
Houston, do you care to speculate?
If the motion fails, I guess we wouldn't be doing a survey.
Okay, so then from that I would take that there be no change to our current policy?
Unless there was a separate direction from council in that regard.
Okay. I will have comments to Mr. Chair.
I have no other questions on this matter. So the motion has been moved, and Councillor Davies, since you were the mover of that, you may comment on that now.
Right. I'm going to be voting against this, primarily because public engagement I think is incredibly important, but at the same time we're a representative democracy, and this is one of the more complex items I think that we've dealt with. And I have significant concern that we're going to get public feedback based on information that people frankly don't really understand, because we've read dozens of pages in reports with graphs of where we are, why we're there. And I think this is one of those decisions that council has been deeply educated on and should be making the decision. Because in reality, what's going to happen here, because we aren't allowed to offer more options, as Councillor Gazzola asked, what the public engagement is we're going to the public and saying, which pigeonhole do you all want to fit in? And the result of that is going to be, there's going to be some segment of the population that's happy with it, and the majority of them are not, because we can't offer options. So if this fails, I think the only alternative, as I mentioned at committee, is that we immediately move to a spot rate approach. So there's no speculation or varied approach. And at that point, we would be able to also encourage equalized billing. And I think the other huge part of this is that to increase choice, we can only offer one option, but the private sector can offer multiple options. So if we don't spend this $30,000, which is clearly earmarked for marketing, we could probably use that better to help advertise and communicate to the public that this is our single option, but if you want other options, if you want longer term fixed rate, medium term fixed rate, we're going to facilitate that with the private sector.
Councillor Singh.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. And if I had to pose that question for myself, I personally think spot rate purchasing is the right model to go. But I'm not here to just go by what I think is right. I think we have to allow the public to have their say. We can't just defer, say, you know what, if they can't comprehend all the information, we should make all the decisions on their behalf. Especially when there is precedence in the past that before changing any policies for rate setting, there had been, I guess, a survey done or a customer input process that has been done in the past. And I think this is a simple process. We're allowing the public to have the opportunity to be educated as to how the purchasing is done, and then make an informed decision and give direction to council, and for us to assess all that information based on the public input that we received, and then finally make the decision. And I think that process is very clear, and we should allow that to happen. So I'll support the consultant process for the public input.
Councillor Gazzola.
Yeah, I want to go along the same lines. I didn't realize that this was the vote that's before us to support that and the other disappears. I thought we were going down the street where we're going to look at all the options, and the first thing we're going to do is look and listen to what our customers want. We should be listening to our customers all the time. Personally, after I've seen what has happened and where we're going down the road, I too am totally in favor of going to the spot rate, the market rate. There's no speculation there, and it's something that people can, as things are happening in the world and there are ruffles all over the place, it will be affected in our spot rate. People can understand that. We sure have the spot rate when we're buying gasoline at the pump, so I don't see a problem going in that direction. But I would first like to hear, and I'm hopeful that that's where we're going to go. And even to go there, we have a bit of time because we have fixed rates in place for 4 or 5 years. I think this year, 65% of what we're consuming is at the fixed rate. So we have an opportunity down the road to go to the spot rate, and I hope we will. But in the meantime, I would like to hear, I think the last time that we've gone to our customers, I don't think that the surveys have been that true or understandable. I think this is a good road to go first, and then we take the next steps and the options after that. So I will support the going forward.
Councillor Verbanovich.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I will be supporting the motion before us as well. Kitchener Utilities has a long history of really being customer-focused in terms of the relationship it has between its customers and the utility. And I think it's incumbent on us on continuing that. I recognize where Councillor Davies is coming from. There's no doubt that this is a complex issue. And at the end of the day, this survey that is going to come back will be another piece of information that we're going to need to consider as we look to make a decision about future direction of the utility. It's one piece out of many that we're going to need to use, and I think it will provide us some valuable information that will assist us in that regard. I think it would be much more difficult to make that decision without the benefit of that information, and trying to see if there is a change in the appetite of our consumer base in terms of how our rate structure should work in the future. I would hope that our consulting company that ultimately gets selected has the ability to break this down into language that the average customer can understand. That's one of the things that we should be looking at in terms of the level of expertise they provide us for the process.
Councillor Fernandez.
Thank you. It's very crucial that we take the time to hear what our customers have to say. So I think the following are important criteria for our consultant to consider. One, that they need to be clear about what the need is and what the outcome of the survey is. Two, that council should be able to hear what the questions are going to be. And my understanding when I look at the report and in my notes, that was the intention. That focus groups and suggested by the delegation, certainly the work that has been done by the two gentlemen, that maybe we should consider asking them if they would be willing to give up their time to help be a part of this process. 4, that a heads up to the customers, as I've already asked Ms. Houston to consider doing, and she thought seemed to think that was a good idea, so that they at least have some heads up before the surveys start coming down. Simplistic language. Yes, it is a very complicated, and it's taken me a long time to understand this myself, but I think I'm getting there. I think that the examples that have been given, that consumers are paying at the gas pumps a spot rate every time they drive up to the gas pumps, is probably a very good example. It might be a little bit, I think the other option of being able to sit on an equal building is something else that's an excellent option. I just want to point a clarification, because I know this has been asked and re-asked, but just so that I can make sure I have it in my head, we would not be able to put as an option or part of a question, would you, and of course it will be up to the consultant, but would you be interested in looking at a private sector approach? We would not be able to ask a question like that. Is that?
I'm not sure what you mean by asking them if they would want to have a private sector approach.
There's been some discussion about the different options, and
Yes.
I know Councillor Davey had suggested that we do sort of a hybrid if people can choose private sector. So a question like that would be okay. We wouldn't have a problem with having that, directing the consultant to ask a question like that.
Ms. Houston may wish to comment, but that already exists. I mean, they have that opportunity now. It's it's what it is now. It won't change. It can't change according to OAB rules.
Right. Okay. And but Kitchener Utilities has never made it very clear or obvious to a customer that they would have that option. We've already always any information that I, as a consumer, has received has been to really negate the viability of these private enterprises, or to make them look sort of like the bad guy that's coming to your door.
I don't think that's quite right. We have, I think it was Mr. Malcolm who commented that or Mr. Grenbaugh, I'm sorry, I may get the name wrong, was saying we have an obligation to inform the public, and in fact, but they were saying that is their choice. So, Ms. Houston, do you want to add something to that?
But there are some limitations in terms of our ability to promote other private sellers of gas. We can certainly create a link on our website that would direct people to natural gas and electricity websites that exist, but we can't be out there promoting other suppliers.
Of course, and that's, thank you, that's the clarification I was looking for. I appreciate that. I think even putting a link on our website is showing a sign of very good faith, and showing our customers that we have that they have these options, and to be educated in all the options is the best way for them to choose what's best for them and their families. And the last point I think that would be important is a good communication. Any consultant worth their weight in gold will make sure that we have a very good, solid communication program that gets out to our customers before they start doing the surveys. So I think if those things are in place, then I feel fairly confident that we will have a good selection and a good process and a good survey, and the response that will be what our public and our customers ask for.
Councillor Etherington?
Yeah, through you, Mr. Mayor, obviously I very much want to see this research and survey take place, so I'll be supporting this. To date, we've got the opinions and views of a tiny group of people. Our residents are perfectly capable of understanding the issue and giving their opinions, so let the taxpayers speak, and based on what they say, we can then make a better informed decision.
Councillor Glenn Graham.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. And I'd like to first of all thank Messrs. Donald and Dravitz for raising this issue and educating the public along with you, and as well as council. I think that it's been very instructive for us as one of the two cities in Ontario that still has this utility. We have a unique perspective, and it's even more important for us, if we care about transparency, to educate our citizens who are also consumers and stakeholders of this important utility. So we have an even greater burden to ensure that they understand in clear and simple language that they have multiple opportunities to digest this and to comment. And therefore, it's really critical we do get it right in the process, that we do take our time with it, that we do allow people to really, as Mr. David said, to reflect upon it and to then comment. I think that's wonderful, and it's a very well taken comment. I've also heard, and I think it's true, that council has to have some oversight about this process to ensure that we do get it right and that we feel comfortable with it, because we've invested a lot in this politically, and in terms of our citizen engagement, I think we've really got a lot to on the line, really, to demonstrate that we do have an outcome that is transparent, that does reflect what the citizens want. We have to ensure that they understand the options before them. This has been confusing, I think, even now for the council's perspective. So I think it's really important we lay out, what our options are clearly to the citizens, and that we do have an understanding of what the questions will be before they go out and we have a report coming back to us.
Councillor Ioannidis.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. I think it's important that we do get this public consultation. I think at the same time it will be something that will educate the public on the process, because I think the perception out there is that it's just as easy like a mortgage, and reality is it's a lot more difficult than what it is. And I think we need to be very cautious on just listening to some concerns about going towards spot rate, because I think having some financial background on this, if we go strictly by spot rate, we will definitely lose the opportunity to give our customers a better rate and save dollars. So we have to be very careful on that, and I think we have to give our customers a clear understanding that if we go spot rate, they will lose on opportunities to save. And I think you need a financial plan to make this accurate and to make sure we do this the proper way, because I know through my financial background, when you chase returns, you don't win. You need a plan, and that's where we need to communicate that to the public.
Okay, there are no further speakers. I'll just make a couple of comments. In reference to the equalized billing, as we have been told a number of times, and I use it, it will not help with the rates. It only is dealing with the volume, so that at the true-up month, if I've used more than what I paid for on equalized billing based on the estimate, I will pay for it in that 12th month, or vice versa. So it deals with volume only, not rates. It's been said a couple of times, or many times, that it is a complex issue, and absolutely correct. I happen to be, as I've mentioned before, a Union Gas customer for where I live in the city of Kitchener, which is essentially a spot market. So I'm accustomed to it. If I, for my own self, had to make a decision right now for myself, if I had that opportunity, I would probably choose the spot market. But I think it is absolutely critical that we do get the information from our customers, and hence the survey that I will support. Regardless of what decision we make, there will be a transition time, and that's what Councillor Gazzola was saying earlier, that we have to work our way through the gas which you've already purchased. And so if we should decide on, is it May 1st or June 1st when we make the change? I forget, whatever time it is that we make the change on an annual basis, and say we're going to go to spot market from now on. It's going to be a blend of that for a number of months and years before we actually get to a true spot market, and there would have to be that understanding. So the motion is on the floor, and it was moved and seconded, I believe. Is that correct? Okay. So it is now, a recorded vote has been called for. This is on the consultant issue, getting the survey. It is not deciding on spot rate or not. That is carried. Thank you. We have one further delegation, and in keeping with sort of the spirit of some of the things we were talking about earlier today, this item is not on the agenda. It was going to be raised by Councillor Glenn Graham under new business, but there is a delegation here to raise an issue. Jeffrey Beckner. So unless it's an urgent matter, we would not be dealing with this matter tonight.
Indeed. As a matter of fact, on my way here, I discovered just how urgent it is. Anyway, I'm here to address the closure of Aaron Street West between Breadup Street and Victoria Street to accommodate the length of the GO train at the Via train station. I was under the impression that this was a temporary, in fact, I thought it was to be temporary. In fact, during that first year, I happened to talk to Councillor Verbanovic at an event, and he likewise said that he hoped it was as well. I live in the Guelph and Lancaster Street area, and one of my main destinations for work, socializing, shopping, cultural events, and other activities is downtown Kitchener. As my main mode of transportation of choice is a bicycle, and Aaron Street is my main artery to get there, this closure has a major impact on me. Aaron Street is the safest, most efficient route for me and many other City of Kitchener residents to access the center of the city, including the library, the art gallery, City Hall, downtown businesses, and many other agencies and destinations. Anyone who has chosen not to use a car and to transverse this route to the city center must go out of their way now, often walking, cycling, using a wheelchair, or using a grocery cart, pushing a baby buggy, etc., along routes such as Weber Street that are not only less safe, but are actually life-threatening. Tonight, I found that out because I had to use that route. Unfortunately, a bus that I waited for 10 or 15 minutes wasn't coming, and I had to cycle. And I had a car behind me. I didn't know where I was supposed to go with the snow on the road and at the edge. That said, because of the Market Street closure due to the bridge fiasco, this situation is further amplified and is made more critical. There ought to at least be some way of having pedestrian access across the railway tracks at this point of Aaron Street. After all, this is a street that is owned by the City of Kitchener, and by extension of that, owned by the residents of the City of Kitchener. There are dozens of railway crossings throughout this city, throughout this region, throughout this province, throughout this country, that they're able to keep car traffic and pedestrian traffic, etc., separated by a train using flashing lights and barriers. And that seems to have been sufficient, particularly in this city, for well over a century, and I don't understand why Via, the region, or Metrolinx, or whoever else is dealing and in charge of this situation, can't have done the same thing. Earlier this year, I tried to find out how this closure came about, who was responsible, and how long it was going to last. Basically, these are the sorts of answers that I was eventually surmised from my conversations with different levels of government. The City of Kitchener had no say. The region of Waterloo had no say. Metrolinx had jurisdiction. And that temporary closure, as far as they were concerned, meant that it was going to be until the new transportation center was completed, and that meant that this idea of temporary for them was 7 to 8 years, and that's semi-permanent in my vocabulary, not temporary. And finally, and why I would be presenting this to you, is I'm wanting to know what can be done to reopen this section of Aaron Street, at least for the pedestrians and cyclists and the disabled and mothers with baby buggies and other people that are classified as active transportation participants. Seeing as how we're pushing for active transportation in this community, we want more activity in the city center. And with all of these closures and with the ongoing construction at Weber Street that's going to be ongoing for another 4 or 5 years while they do what they need to do there, essentially we are channeling people in through that route, and heaven forbid people try and come down St. Ledger Street in the middle of winter in any capacity other than a vehicle. What can we do? What can we do? What can you do? To get under time?
You have 30 seconds. So you're good.
And just the last little bit I'll toss in, and I just really appreciate the consideration that you gave the earlier speaker, because I happened to catch it on TV while I was coming out, and he was extremely emotional, and it's really brave for somebody to come up here and do that. Really brave, and you were really, really understanding and compassionate, so I appreciate that. Once again, though, I am dealing specifically about how to...
Thank you very much. Are there any questions of the delegation? Since this is not on the agenda, my recommendation would be if council wishes to have some information on this matter, that would take a motion to ask for information to be brought forward at a future meeting. So I would keep that in mind. We're not going to get into the detail of this with Mr. Beckner right now, because that would be later on should we decide to proceed. So, Councillor Glenn Graham, do you wish to bring something forward?
I actually appreciate you allowing the delegate to speak, first of all, Mr. Mayor. Secondly, Mr. Beckner, great job, and I appreciate your professional delegation tonight. And I did speak to Mr. Allen. I do have a question of the delegation, but Mr. Allen may be in a position without a report to satisfy council, but I'll leave that to you. Mr. Beckner, thank you so much for this information.
Can I just make one point of clarification here, and this is about technique right now? Sorry, being in the moment and that sort of thing.
What part do you want to speak to?
What it is that actually, audibly, I could hear you better back there than I can here. So there's something...
Okay, sorry, I'll speak into...
I appreciate that.
Sure.
The same with
Thank
Mr. Zaire, Mayor, I appreciate it. The same as yourself.
Thank
Go ahead, Councillor Glenn Graham.
Sure.
Thanks.
Speaking on the phone to you, you mentioned that one of the reasons that the trains do block that area is that they need to exchange for about 4 minutes per day, and then the rest of the time that the route is not blocked at errands, and that's the rationale that was provided to you. Could you just share that with us?
Is this on again? Okay,
Yes.
thanks.
Yes, it is.
What it was that after speaking to whoever was in charge at the city level and then got passed along to the region level and eventually got passed on to Metrolinx, in speaking with them, I asked them how long was the GO train how many times did it come to the station? And they said twice a day. I said, how long was it in the station? And he said, approximately 2 minutes each time. And I said, so that's 4 minutes out of the day? And yes. And I said, so the rest of the 23 hours and 56 minutes, essentially, you're not using that space. Well, anyway, I got, I didn't get much of an answer there. So you're correct that was the case. The other thing I might add is that they had apparently done an environmental assessment, impact assessment, or whatever they call it, and that had included conferring with residents that were going to be impacted by this. I have yet to meet one, and I have an email from someone at the city that I will share at a later date. Because of confidentiality, I'll hold that back. But essentially it said that you guys had no say. You were just informed.
Thanks very much.
Okay. Councillor Benovich, is this a question of the delegation? Okay. All right. Thank you.
Can I sit?
Inspector.
Thank you.
Okay. Councillor Glenn Graham, do you wish to bring forward a motion?
No, I would simply ask Mr. Allen if he wouldn't mind answering some questions, because I think that might satisfy us, but I'm at your discretion.
All right, if that can be brief, because I don't want us to get into again, I'm thinking of what we had dealt with earlier today.
He said it wouldn't require a report, so...
Mr. Allen.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. We did investigate this a little bit. It was brought up about a month ago. It might be possible. There are a few complications to it. As it's already been stated, it is a GO platform, so we have an elevation difference between the platform and the tracks that would have to be negotiated or reconfigured. It would probably require approval of GO and Genesee, Wyoming, who operates the railway. It would probably require a reconfiguration or a rebuilding of the crossing warning system that's been decommissioned because of the closure. So I'm not saying it's not possible. I'm just saying there's some complications to it that, if directed so, staff could report back on that.
Okay. May I ask about the cost that you would anticipate for all these changes?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, unfortunately, we did not do a detailed cost estimate for this. I wouldn't want to guess right now, but if the crossing warning systems have to be reinstated, it wouldn't be very cheap.
Mr. Mayor, based on the fact that we're wanting to keep this at a high level, perhaps it would be beneficial if I did bring a motion forward to ask for a brief report on the cost and implications of considering this.
All right. Is there a seconder for that, Councillor Urbanovich? Okay. Speaking to the motion now only.
If I could just quickly, I do think that, because Margaret Avenue is down, Weber Street is under construction, and this is a major artery to the downtown. It does bear some further consideration or reconsideration. We haven't had a detailed cost estimate. I'm not sure about the EA aspect of it, but I think that would be helpful to have some understanding about, and whether or not it's feasible to have a simple railway crossing or whether we'd have to build some archway that would support pedestrian and bikes. So I would ask people to support bringing a report forward. Perhaps, Mr. Allen, if you could indicate if this could be done within 3 months, or perhaps give us a timeline of how long it would take to prepare.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I think 3 months would be a reasonable time frame.
So I would propose that it would come to a committee report in 3 months' time.
Councillor Urbanovich.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor, and I will obviously support the recommendation. The delegation did speak to me on one occasion about it, and I also had the opportunity to actually go and observe the area in question. What I find interesting about it is that pedestrians are using it all the time. In the time that I was there, and it was maybe for 5 minutes, 3 individuals actually crossed over the tracks. And walked around the gate that's there. So the point is that it's already being used. It's not unlike any other crossing, urban crossing that I can think of, save and except for the point that Councillor Glenn Graham made, which is that the old signals have been removed. But I think with a minor adjustment on the ramping in terms of the pavement and the way it works, I think it can be, quite frankly, reinstated and made functional, and hopefully that's what we'll see come back from staff.
Okay, we won't prejudge that. The motion is simply to have a report in 3 months' time. Those in favour? Opposed? That is carried. So we'll now move towards the tenders, rather. I'm sorry. Is there someone prepared to move the tenders? Councillor Gazzola, Councillor Ioannidis. Any discussion on the tenders? If so, we'll take them in their order. First item alone, then printing of the Leisure magazine. Anyone wish to speak to that? Councillor Gazzola?
No, actually, I would...
Okay, you're not on the... Is there anyone on the Leisure magazine? Okay. Freeport sewage pumping station upgrades. Councillor Yanetsky.
Yes, thank you. I'm trying to understand on that third page of the report where it got the cost analysis on that tender, and it's costing $4.6 million for this whole particular phase of this particular work, and it's indicated that a good chunk of the money, development charges, will be provided at 2.9 plus million. And I thought we were in a hole on development charges. So where would the money be coming from?
Mr. Chapman?
You are correct. That deficit or that reserve fund is in a deficit position. And Council has basically approved a capital forecast that intends to return that reserve to a balanced position by 2014. So you are correct. You'll be spending the reserve in a deficit position, but there is a plan by the time of the next background study to return that to a break-even position.
So this has been looked at for next year, and when it comes back to a balanced position, then that's when the money will be used?
This cost is in the forecast presently, so it forms part of that plan that sees us spending more than we're taking in right now, but spending less in future years so that we return it to a break-even position.
So it will be spent now, but overall, if you recall, the two development charges were in a positive position, just that the one was in a deficit position. So they're working between the two of them. One was soft services, if I can recall, or what, non-engineering and non-engineering. Am I correct in that?
I do believe Councillor Yaneski is correct that overall they are in a deficit position, but we have curtailed the program so that by 2014 or the end of the current bylaw, we'll be back in a break-even position.
Okay, I guess I was thinking, because later on, then I guess maybe it was next year that one of them was positive.
And I believe one may be positive right now and one is negative, but overall there is a small deficit there.
Okay.
On that item, Councillor Gazzola?
The cash flow problem is not a budgeting problem. I keep asking about the projected cost, staff time, permitting, and material testing, and in the dialogue it says that the line item also includes all regulatory permitting, geotechnical, and material testing, and yet, when I look at it, geotechnical is also in a separate line there. So is it included in the 100,000 above, or?
Any explanation for that? Who can speak to that? Are we looking to Mr. Allen? Is it yours? I'm not sure. I thought I saw Mr. Chapman looking over to you.
I mean, they can bring this back to us. It's not going to change anything tonight.
So if you could just get an answer and then send an email to council about that information. Moving on to the Old Westmount Sanitary Sewer. Councillor Gazzola.
I'm curious, if we look at this project, we're almost 50% over budget on it. Is there an explanation for that? That's a substantial difference.
Who can speak to that?
Through you, Mr. Mayor. Yes.
Same question I had.
Oh, sorry.
Go ahead.
Yeah, through you, Mr. Mayor. The tenders did come in higher than expected. We set the budget in summer of last year, and at that time we were still doing the design. One of the design activities we had the consultant do was do some video inspection of the sewers that we were not able to do prior to that. It needed specialized equipment. When they got through and did some of that investigation, we found some more areas adjacent to this pipe that we wanted to repair at the same time. So it was a scope addition to it, which probably accounts for most of that cost.
Do we have any options here?
We could cut back on the scope, but the idea is this is one of the older pipes in the city, and we'd like to get this whole thing cleaned up in one shot.
I can probably appreciate that, but it would be nice to have had some sort of rationalization for moving forward when there's such a substantial differential.
Okay.
I guess I would ask in the future, if there is such a substantial differential, there should be some kind of explanation as to why we're moving forward. In this case, you say the options are not there to not move forward?
I think if I can paraphrase it, yes, we could not go forward, but there are consequences and risk involved since they discovered something additionally. So I think if there's some additional information that you would like to have sent to us post this council meeting, that would be fine.
Well, that would be nice to receive some explanation as to what the risks are and why we're moving in this direction.
Yeah, in fact, that should have been part of the original report. And when there's such a variance like that, I think that's been requested several times. On the same tender, Councillor Fernandez?
Yes. Just a quick question, if possible, if we could, can we do it break it into 2 phases of this project so that we carry it into the next year? Or if we were to hold off doing, no, could we take money from another project that is budgeted from the same fund so that we wouldn't be running into a deficit and push a project out?
Keep in mind the money is coming from the reserve for that account, so there would be, if we do it as you're suggesting, it effectively is pushing something else off.
Yeah, okay.
You okay with that?
Yep, got it, okay, yep. Mayor, answer the question.
Anything further? Okay, then the water heater tenders. Councillor Yanetsky.
Yeah, I'm trying to understand that even though this is going to be awarded to REAM for their water installation of the city's rental water heater programs, how many heaters does that affect? Like, I mean, there's $1.1 million in terms of the cost, but how many numbers of hot water heaters are we talking?
Mr. Gordon, what is the quantity?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I will have to get that quantity for you. That is, these water heaters are kept in inventory, and then they wouldn't be purchased all at one time. We buy a certain number, they're put in the inventory, and then when they're required, they're issued out of inventory. So that's the estimate of what the total cost will be at the end of that, total usage will be, but it's not something that's spent all at one time. It's only done as new builds are done and water heaters are replaced.
I think the point is that in order for them to bid on that, they would have had to know the quantity, and so that would have been useful information in the
Yes,
tender report.
I will get you that. I have that.
Thank you. Preferred beer sponsor for KMAC and golf courses, Councillor Gazzola.
I just wanted a little more information as to what are we awarding here? You talk about $560,000. Is that how much beer we're going to buy from them, or what is it?
Mr.
Are
May.
they giving us a cut, or?
Mr. May? Just hang on. Oh, I've got to get rid of somebody there. Just hang on. Okay, now I can click you in.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, this is an agreement that we will enter into with Molson's to provide them with preferred product placements, preferred advertisements in our facilities, and as a result, they'll provide us with this revenue on, I believe it's a 5-year basis.
This is
this is a form of sponsorship.
So we're going to get,
we will receive
by
that.
dealing with them and giving them our business, they're going to give us $500,000 over 5 years.
Yes.
And the tender went out like that, the proposal?
Yes, this is not unusual. In fact, as part of the sponsorship strategy, we're going to be doing similar things with non-alcoholic beverages in all of our facilities.
Councillor Davey.
Thank you. We're going to get to that in just a second. First, I'm curious, remind me why we wouldn't be able to see what the competitor's bid was?
Mr. May? Or Mr. Gordon? I'm not sure who could answer that. Mr. Gordon? Is there anything proprietary about showing the value of the 2 bids? You're going to hang on a second. You clicked yourself off again. Please stay on.
Okay. Yes, we can provide that information to council.
Okay.
Okay. And I guess, and my other question is back to Mr. May regarding the sponsorship aspects of this. My concern is that other arenas have had sponsorships for this sort of agreement as well as naming rights. So I guess my question is there concern that we're possibly getting less value, for example, for the Memorial Auditorium Complex than if we were to incorporate naming rights as well?
Through you, Mr. Chair, we did discuss that and did not feel, in fact, we felt that this is a relatively good deal in comparison to our previous experience. The types of examples that you're providing are for, the ones that I'm aware of at least, are for new facilities. The auditorium, as you know, is an older facility, and that, frankly, will challenge us in terms of naming rights on that facility.
Okay, and I guess, sorry, probably the second last question. What was the amount? Is there a comparable amount that we had previous to this, in previous years?
Mr. Gordon?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I'm going to have to check that.
Okay.
I don't know that answer.
Does anyone know that answer? There are two pieces of information that should have been in this report in terms of what the comparison was and what was last term, last contract.
That concludes my questions, Mr. Mayor. If they can be emailed, I'm content with that.
Okay. And I think that's it as far as the tenders are concerned. Those in favor? Opposed? That's carried. Mr. Chapman, did you want to speak to that item?
I would just draw your attention to the Margaret Avenue Bridge tender. I don't know if you've discussed that one as well, but there was one circulated under separate cover for the bridge replacement.
I beg your pardon. Yes, it was separate there. I did not have it up. So we'll deal with that one separate because it was not included in the, at least I didn't see it as part of the original. So is there someone prepared to move the Margaret Avenue Consultant Services? Councillor Van Dames, Councillor Ioannidis. Discussion on that item, Councillor Ioannidis.
Yeah, Mr. Allen, I'm wondering if I see that the total budget for all phases of this project is $6.4 million. Is that still the Class C estimate?
Mr. Allen?
Through the Mayor, yes, that's correct. That's a Class C.
Thank you.
Okay, seeing none, no further. Those in favor? Opposed? That's carried. Now go to the reports of the committees, the yellow sheets. Community and Infrastructure Services, Councillor Singh. Ioannidis, are you jumping in?
Yeah, I was jumping in. I think I forgot to.
I'm going to take you off there, Councillor Ioannidis. Press your button, please. Press your button, please.
It has been moved by myself and seconded by Councillor Frank Etherington that the report of the Community Infrastructure Service Committee be adopted for December 2nd.
Okay, is this the report that you had a conflict on?
There was one conflict with Councillor Unesky with the tier grants.
But not yourself?
Not myself.
Okay. So it's been moved and seconded. We'll deal with all items with the exception of the grants. We'll deal with the community orchestra, Councillor? Yeah. For Tier 1 grants. So we'll deal with that one item first. Those in favor of that particular grant? Opposed? That is carried. Are there any other items to discuss? Those in favor of the balance of the report? Those in favor? Opposed? That's carried. Finance and Corporate Services, Councillor Davey, you have two reports.
Correct. The first report is the direction to staff for the issue papers coming out of the capital budget, and there are 11 items listed there. And the second report is item number 3 has been dealt with, so there's just items number 1 and 2. The first is purchase order issued to Stantec Consulting for engineering services related to reconstruction of Queen Street, and the amount of $47,000 be approved. And
the business plan.
Right, yeah. And the business plan is the second item for 2014 to 2016, and that's being referred to the January 30th council meeting.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded.
By Councillor Singh.
It's been seconded by Councillor Singh. Any discussion? Those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. The Planning and Strategic Initiatives Committee from November the 25th and December the 2nd. Councillor Urbanovich.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. First of all, it's moved by myself, seconded by Councillor Kelly Galloway Seelock. The report of November the 25th pertaining to the corporate customer service strategy and the traffic calming policy.
Let's deal with them separately because, I have three people. Is that the conflict in that one? Okay, sorry, Councillor Ioannidis, what item was that again?
Item number 3.
Item number 3.
Which is
No,
detailed
we're
planning
dealing
work.
with them separately. So this is the first report, November 25th. There is no item number 3.
This is the November 25th meeting, Councillor Ioannidis, not December 2nd.
Sorry.
Okay. Now, we're just dealing with November 25th report. There's one item.
2 items.
2 items.
Sorry, 2 items, yes. Any discussion on those items? Councillor Davey.
Just I'm already in here, but just a quick question from the traffic calming policy I requested. I'm not sure if I should be seeing it here or not. I just want to make sure that wasn't missed. I requested an issue paper for the financial implications of reducing from 4 streets per year to 3. I want to make sure that wasn't missed.
Ms. Houston. Sorry, go ahead.
I can confirm that that is coming forward in the issue papers.
Excellent, thank you.
Okay. Those in favor? Oh, sorry, Councillor Galloway Seelock on that item.
Just want to make a quick comment.
Go ahead.
It'll be really quick. Just on the traffic calming policy, I think there was just a lot of really good discussion that came forward at committee, and I'm really happy to see the 3 clauses that either change or amend what the policy was moving forward, and I think it's definitely going to be a positive thing for the community overall that this policy has been reviewed.
Okay. Now, those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. Yes, it was unanimous. Planning and Strategic Initiatives Committee for December the 2nd.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Moved by myself, seconded by Councillor Kelly Galloway Seelock. 3 items: the Municipal Partnership Program, the Statue Project, and the planning around rapid transit stations.
Okay, but there are the conflicts. Councillor Singh on which item?
Number 3, for planning around rapid transit stations due to real estate that my parents own close to the vicinity of the stations.
Okay. And Councillor Ioannidis?
Yeah, item number 3 as well, due to property owning in the vicinity.
All right. We'll deal with that item separately. I have 2 speakers. Are you calling on this, referencing that item, number 3? If not, we'll take item 3 now as a vote. Those in favor? Opposed? That's carried with the 2 conflicts noted. Abstentions. Leaves 2 items. Councillor Glenn Graham.
Thank you. I'm not sure how to refer to this. It's under sponsorship, and it's at the bottom of the page, but it's listed as A, but there's an A at the top under 1, so I'm not sure.
The paragraph right at the bottom of the page.
Okay. So I would I'd like to make an amendment to remove the portion that says save and accept the Rotunda and Civic Square right to the bottom of the page. If I could speak to that.
Is there a seconder for the Councillor Gazzola? Okay, go ahead and speak to that.
Yeah, I just believe that we should hear all the options. I think there's tasteful ways to have sponsorship throughout the city. I don't want to preclude any kind of options that staff would bring forward. I do think staff have given thought to this. I do think it's incumbent upon us to hear about all the options, and I think that there is potential there to do things in a way that would be respectful and would actually enhance the city. So I would like to not prejudge what would come forward, but I'd like to encourage council to hear everything. I think that's our obligation.
All right, speaking to the amendment only. I have 2 speakers. Are you wishing to speak to the amendment? I have Councillor Etherington, Singh. Are you speaking to the amendment, Councillor Etherington? Okay.
Number 2, Mr.
All right. Councillor Singh to the amendment?
Yes.
Okay. Go ahead.
Thank you, and if I can ask, actually, the question is more posed towards staff, because what Councillor Glenn Graham is recommending, obviously in committee, we decided to preclude those two areas, especially considering the importance, and I guess accepting that those two locales could be considered as more sacred than the rest. Mr. May, I'd hate to put you on the spot, but what kind of a sponsorship opportunity could really come out of those two areas, the Rotunda and the Civic Square? Can you kind of comment more on it? I'd love to get some sort of staff perspective on it.
Mr. May.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, off the top of my head, I can think of some opportunities in Civic Square where we may offer up a package of benefits to a partner, where they may get a logo on the ice surface through the winter. They may get signage on the tent over the stage. They may get employee events for their employees, where they may have some dedicated space within the, a fenced-off area where they could have a celebration with their employees. They may get reduced or free tickets to the Blues Fest, as an example. And in exchange, they would provide us with financial support that could potentially go to things like investing in a new stage.
Okay, and that's great, and that's what I really thought of when I thought of those two venues. But obviously, what kind of forced me to be cautious was, naming rights, naming the Civic Square something of a corporate name, or naming the Rotunda. So it could be exclusive of that, right?
It could be, and if that would, excuse me, if that was council's wish, then I think some clear direction on that this evening would be helpful. The revenue projections developed for the strategy include some naming right component on both of those, and so if council believes that the naming rights is completely off the table and we shouldn't explore that at all, then I would suggest some direction of that effect would be well received tonight. However, if council is open to the kinds of partnerships I described earlier, then again, we would need clarification.
Okay, that's helpful. And perhaps Councillor Glenn Graham, having brought that forward, may want to add that to his motion, as I think that's helpful information. And it gives a little bit more, I guess, information for us to see exactly if it's something that we could support. Obviously, if it excludes naming rights. Beyond that, I think there's opportunity to generate revenue, but we have to consider at what cost as well. As long as we put the parameters, I think it's something that we could still consider as an opportunity that could be looked at in the future.
Point of clarification, Mr. Mayor.
Yes, I think we do need to have some clarification. Go ahead, Councillor Bennett.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. And as I was the one who made that amendment, or suggested it, I believe, and it clearly says that it's save and except for the Rotunda and Civic Square, which are removed from the inventory for naming rights opportunities. So we're only talking about naming right opportunities for those two facilities. In fact, the question came up then at committee: what does that mean in terms of the stage? What does that mean in terms of the ice rink? Can those still be named? Could we put advertising on those? And the answer was all of those are still on the table. That wasn't part of the motion that was being considered. And I would really strongly urge us to keep the motion as was originally approved by committee with respect to those two facilities. I think, or with respect to the naming of those two areas. In the end, I think we need to remember that this is the seat of government. And to start naming these two key elements would then open us up to the question of where do we stop? Do we call this the Sears Council Chamber as an example? Do we call it the Bay Rotunda? I mean, where do we stop with that kind of thing? And it would be similar to, in my view, going to Center Block and saying this is now the Toyota Center Block. I just don't think it's becoming of a seat of government to go down that direction. Other things, absolutely, I think they can be on the table, and we should be taking those to the citizens to hear what they say.
Thank you. Just to be clear, if we looked at it carefully on, I know you don't have, well, you may or may not have the report with you, but on 1-72, the naming rights were there separately for the outdoor rink and the cube. It was just in terms of the rotunda and the square in terms of the naming rights. Some of the other components were stated that were still on the table. Councillor Etherington, on this point?
No, I'm sorry, Mr. Mayor. I'm on number 2 for
Okay.
comment.
Councillor Gazzola, on this issue?
Still on the issue. I seconded the motion to get it on the table. I don't really agree with it, but I would like to see everything on the table when it goes to the public. I have enough faith in the public that they're not going to want to have Pepsi Square here or something like that. But the only reason I support it is everything should go to the public and let the public talk about it. I have faith in the public.
Councillor Glenn Graham, on this issue?
Yes, I'll just speak quickly to this. I may not, in the end, support naming rights for these areas. We're talking about a process. To shortcut the process means we're not open to be persuaded. I think our job is to listen to all the information, all the facts. We can say no, but I do believe that it's not making any decision other than to be open at this point to hearing what could come back. There's no harm in it. We're not making a decision that's substantive. We're making a decision on process. So I would encourage us to be open to the information and make a decision later on.
Okay, I have no further speakers on that issue. Clear? I would like to make some comments. I would ask you to take a stand on this issue. If you don't believe it's right, take a stand. This is like potentially having a naming right for the square as a whole, not some of those components that we talked about, or the rotunda, is like selling your soul. If you think you're going to not support it later on, say it now. Take a stand. Mr. Mayor, are you adding something of concern?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I would simply note that item B at the top of the following page has a similar reference, and so I would suggest that whatever final wording council may wish to either adjust or not adjust on A should be applied to B.
Yes, that's correct. Okay, so we are dealing with, as one amendment, on A and B, the motion is to remove the words related to the rotunda and civic square, which means that they're in the list for potential naming. Are we clear on that?
So we vote yes, they're in the list, and we vote no.
If you vote yes for this motion that is on the floor, it means that they will be on the list for potential naming. Clear? They will be on the list. That's correct. They will be on the list if you vote yes. Okay? Clarification on that, Councillor Singh?
Yes, I apologize. Sorry, Mr. Mayor, but I would like to clarify. I understand it's very explicit and clear for A, 1A, but for B, now this is not naming rights. This is other partnerships stuff that Mr. May kind of alluded to. Is that correct?
Mr. May, do you want to come back on that?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I would suggest that the wording be identical in both clauses So whatever is council's wish to include or not include them, it should be the same for both. If you read A, it's about consulting with the public on the list of potential opportunities, and B is consulting with the local business community. I'd suggest you want to be consulting those two stakeholder groups on the same list.
That's correct.
As part of public consultation. Okay. So this is just the consultation that we're talking about. Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah. Take a stand. A motion is there for you to, if yes, they will remain on the list. The motion is lost. Therefore, the wording will remain in A, and it will be amended on B. It will remain in B as well, with the same wording. Okay. Yeah, we haven't voted on any of this yet. I've got another speaker first. Councillor Etherington.
It's on
All right. We'll deal with number 1 then in its entirety, unless there is a motion to take any of it separately. So 1 in its entirety. Recorded vote's been called for. That is carried unanimously. We now move to number 2 and Councillor Etherington.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. You've been very patient. I just wanted to ask about the Councillor Dan Graham added the request for a website. I wanted to know when it'll be in place because I'm getting plenty of reaction. And I don't want to wait until 2014 to collect that reaction.
Who's able to speak to that? Ms. Houston or Ms. Johnson?
Through you, Mr. Mayor. The website is in draft mode right now, pending ratification this evening, and we are also going to spend the rest of the week developing the content for the customer survey. So I suspect it'll be live by week's end.
That's great. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
On number 2, Councillor Gazzola.
I just want to make a comment on this issue. It's a very sensitive issue, and a lot of members of the public are writing to council, and I'm hopeful. We were asked last week if we wanted to receive copies of emails from the public, and I want to make it clear that I think we should be receiving those, but when the public write to council, they're writing to members of council and not to staff, and I think that they expect what they write, if it's to council, that it goes right through to council. I want to emphasize that those should be passed along to us without any consideration.
I think the email about that was because they are forwarded to us. It was whether or not we want to have the report of keeping tabs of them as well at the end.
Well, I just took it for granted that you would keep tabs, but at the same time...
But they are coming to us through the Internet Council.
That's all. Thank you.
Councillor Davey.
Thank you. I just had a quick question on the web-based feedback as well. I assume there'll be a survey, and will the survey be a single question of support or non-support? Because I would also suggest if someone is opposed, if that position changes, if no city dollars are put towards the project.
Ms. Johnson? Do you hear the question? Or Ms. Houston?
I'll maybe take a crack at that. We have, as Ms. Johnson outlined, we haven't put the survey together yet, but we were looking at multiple questions on the survey to get at some of the questions that were raised at council in terms of location, in terms of financial support, and interest in the concept itself.
Perfect, thank you.
Okay, I have no further speakers. Motion is on the floor, therefore. Those in favor? Opposed? That is carried unanimously. Okay. Any unfinished business? Any new business? Questions, answers? Councillor Fernandez.
Yes, this was kind of left over from our discussion this afternoon about effective meetings and procedures. One of the things I've wondered often is if it would be possible for our screens to show what the chair screen shows, the same thing in terms of the list of speakers and who's in the queue and who's not in the queue. I think it's just important for transparency so that everybody can see the same thing.
I think that the transparency, I'll not speak to the technicality of it. I think there's a good and valid reason why it doesn't show, because I think that's when people can start to play games with wanting to always be the last person to speak, and you click in when you want to say something. That's my opinion from a procedural standpoint. Madam Clerk?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, just to let you know that it's really more a technical way that the system operates, does not really afford us the opportunity to have this screen showing up on everybody else's screen. It's the way in which the system actually works. So I don't believe that there's a way for us to move it so that it could be showing on all the screens.
Okay, thank you very much for that.
Okay, bylaws for first reading. Moved by Councillor Ioannidis, seconded by Councillor Yanetsky, that they be read for a first time, but there is one late starter.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, we have one additional late starter item. It's a part lot control exemption with respect to Meadow Ridge Street.
Those in favor? The bylaws, can I see some hands? Those in favor? Opposed? That's carried. It's been resolved by Councillor Glenn Graham that the Council resolve itself in the Committee of the Whole. All in favor? Opposed? That's carried. Yeah, just a second. Go ahead.
Because of my conflict on my item number 4, do you want to take that first so then I can take the rest? I'm chairing the Committee of the Whole, so.
Yeah, actually, it's my cheat sheet though has Glenn Graham. Okay, so it is. Let's do that differently then. Moved by Councillor Singh, the Council resolve itself in the Committee of the Whole. Those in favour? Opposed? That is carried. Now I will deal with. Refer back to which item was that?
Item 4.
I think as chair, you can still deal with it, but you declare your conflict,
okay.
And because you're not entering into the discussion.
Okay, that's great. Should I just do it from here, or do you want to change seats?
To Colin and Christine, what is it easier? When does it become a problem in terms of exchanging seats here? Is it for the audience in terms of cameras, or if we get to recorded votes, obviously it is a problem. But can you help us out? What's preferable?
Through you, Mayor Zaire, it's primarily related to the voting system. Currently, it's set up into the standard council seating. However, if you wish to switch seats, we would need to turn off the current conference, restart the one we have loaded for committee of the whole to allow for the voting system to be
Only
changed?
if we had recorded votes. Okay.
I personally don't care. I'm just asking for
All right.
ease of the meeting.
Well, that's a
so-
good question.
Yeah.
So, Councillor Singh, you can take it from there.
Okay, thank you. And it's been moved by Councillor Etherington reading, second reading of the bylaws. Call to vote. All those in favor? Opposed? That carries. Moved by Councillor Brvenovich, item number 2. Any questions? All right, call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? That carries. Can I have a mover for item 3? Moved by Councillor Ioannidis. Any questions? All right, all those in favor? Opposed? That carries. And moved by Councillor Galloway-Seelock, item 4. Any questions? Oh, I'm sorry, I heard from here, so, okay. Take it away from you. Moved by Councillor Fernandez. All those, any questions? All those in favor? Opposed? That carries.
With the conflict noted.
With the conflict noted, yes. Moved by Councillor Brvenovich, item 5. Any questions? All those in favor? Opposed? That carries. Moved by Councillor Gazzola, item 6. Any questions? All those in favor? Opposed? That carries. Moved by Councillor Glenn Graham, item 7. Any questions? All those in favor? Opposed? That carries. And moved by Councillor Ioannidis again, item 8. Any questions?
I have a question.
Councillor Fernandez?
I know I've had some problems with this item in the past with the mission to Morogoro. Really just want to understand if this is the last trip that we're making in the commitment that we've made in the past.
Staff?
Yeah, through you, Chair Singh. I believe that there will be one more mission after this. This is the 4th year of a 5-year program, so it does conclude in the end of, it concludes with the 31st of March 2015. And the pattern so far with the mission has been one mission from Kitchener to Morogoro and one mission from Morogoro to Kitchener annually during that period of time. So at this point, I think the expectation is one more mission, but I've articulated that in the report. I expect that we'll find out what the final schedule is in the next couple of months.
Okay. Is there an opportunity when this is completed for council to have a real complete understanding of the benefits to this to Morogoro, Tanzania, through the economic development? Maybe where we were 5 years or 4 years ago, and where they are now. Just to get a sense of the value of these different missions. And I know that there's always a positive in terms of the relationships we build, but we're also going there to help teach them and possibly train them, and I stand corrected if I'm not right, for them to build the infrastructure and for them to grow in their municipality. So is there an opportunity for us to really sort of understand where they were and where they are, at this point in time?
Yeah, through you, Chair Singh, there's going to be there is a mandated evaluation of the entire program in the last half of the last year, I believe. So we will actually be participating in that evaluation process, and I'd be happy to also meet with you individually and to bring you up to speed on the nature of the content that we're sharing in Morogoro and the nature of the process in more detail if you wish. But certainly towards the end of the year, I expect there to be, or perhaps in the first quarter of 2015, I expect there to be a report available for council on the whole program.
Okay, that would be great. I'd really appreciate that. And certainly I look forward to having an opportunity to speak one-on-one with you on some more of the details as things have moved forward.
Yep.
Thank you.
Councillor Galloway Seelock.
Yeah, I have a question, then I have a comment. My question is, why is this here if in 2011 council approved the partnership for 5 years?
I believe that we have a policy, a council policy of approving or a council decision on overseas travel by staff. So this is here as a administrative matter.
Okay, well, I would think that would be implied when we agree to move forward with the mission, just because we've committed to a 5-year partnership, both with FCM and with the program within Morogoro. So I think in the future that if that decision is made up, or that information needs to be given up front so that the decision can be made, and that we're not put in a position where we possibly have to pull out either because the Council of Day doesn't want it or because people change their minds or whatever. I think it's important, especially in having some experience with both the partnership that we did with Kumasi, Ghana, where we had some difficulty keeping them engaged in the process. And I think if there's any speculation that we may pull out at any given time because the council makes that decision, I think it's going to be really hard to, first of all, have FCM and CEDA, who provides the funding for this, to pick us as a partner to continue this work, but also for the communities that we partner with, for them to really give us the time and energy that we deserve. So I think overall, I think that needs to be decided up front, that when we make that commitment for 5 years, that we shouldn't see it before us, but that doesn't preclude us from getting a report at the end to give the outline of what was accomplished. And I just wanted to say to that I think it's going to be really hard to quantify the full impact that we've had in Morogoro, having had the opportunity to go over on the initial mission. I know the work that was done just in that initial mission not only reflects the work directly with the MPED program, but also within the community. I know that when I was over there, we were able to attend one of the orphanage that the municipality actually runs, and that's completely outside of the work that the MPED program is developing there. So I think there's been a lot of different spin-offs, and I know that Rod and his group have been continuing to support that outside of the official mission as well. So I think that these are great opportunities for us to share our learning and our capacity with other countries and other groups. And I think that report back would be great, but it'll be really hard to quantify how much impact that we will have overall in Morogoro in any mission that we choose to participate in.
Mayor Zaire?
Thank you. I concur with the summary that Councillor Galloway Seelock said on the relative to the need for this. I stand corrected, but the policy which we have for international travel or outside of the continent relates to conference travel and not to this. And therefore, because there is no cost to the city for travel costs, it is simply the staff time. So I don't think that would, I think it's probably no harm in dealing with this tonight, just to clear up any ambiguity. However, it should be checked out in terms of what that original resolution did state.
Okay. Any other questions? All right. I'll call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? That carries. It's moved by Councillor Verbenovich that the committee rise and report. Oh, all those in favor? Opposed? That carries.
Yes, we did. Yeah.
Or should I ask the clerk if there's anything new? No? Okay.
Okay, it's been moved by Councillor Singh and seconded by Councillor Etherington that the proceedings be noted of the Committee of the Whole. Those in favour? Opposed? That's carried. And it's been moved by Councillor Ioannidis, seconded by Councillor Yanetsky. The bylaws be given third reading. Those in favour? Opposed? That's carried. And it's moved by Councilor Fernandez that we adjourn.
No, I still have to read the...
I just did it for you.
Oh, you did it for me? Oh, okay. How kind.
You weren't on the ball. Thank you. This meeting is adjourned. Sorry, hang on a second. Councillor Davey.
Just a reminder, we're going back into caucus.
Yes, we are returning to the caucus room.